Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I wasn't enjoying our road trip one little bit, but then again, I'd never exactly been a patient traveller at the best of times. This was the last part of our 49-hour journey from New York City to the Oregon coast, but the final stint seemed to have gone on forever, almost as if time had stood still. It had taken us 4 days of travel on the road, where we'd stopped at various hotels along the way for a much-needed overnight stay. It didn't help, of course, that it was unbearably hot and insufferably stuffy cooped up in the car in the middle of the summer. With my husband, we were like two meat pies in an overheated larder that were gradually starting to turn as we were sweating so profusely. Come to think of it, my husband's car did smell a bit funky as our perspiration lingered in the air, rather reminding me of the stale, cheesy smell you get from dirty sneakers. My clothes on the back of my legs were sticking to me, which wasn't remotely pleasant. Gully had refused to put the air conditioning unit on in our SUV. He believed it brought on colds and flu for him, and made him rather sick, even though it was the middle of summer, for goodness sake. I'd never heard anything so ridiculous in all my life, but challenging my obstinate husband on this was more than my life was worth, and frankly I didn't have the energy to put up such a fuss. I knew that you could choose your battles in life, and this was one of those that I was not prepared to fight, nor was I willing to do so, as on a long road trip, quite frankly, it's too exhausting to argue, and it makes the atmosphere on a long sticky journey so much more unpleasant. I had prepared myself well for the sauna I was expecting to endure on this trip. I had brought a damp face cloth which I kept in a plastic bag in my purse, along with a bottle of refresher spray that occasionally I would spray over my face to cool me down, but the relief I received was temporary and short-lived. How I wished that I could dive in an ice-cold swimming pool right now to revive myself from the sludgy, grimy, insufferable feeling of being grubby and unkept, like someone who lived in Tent City and hadn't bathed for months on end. I looked so dishevelled, I couldn't even bear to look at myself in the visor mirror, because I was afraid of what I would see, but I was very conscious that my hair was very greasy and hanging around my face unapologetically. Dark rings had appeared under my eye area that looked as if I hadn't been sleeping. They had become puffy. I did look like someone who had been thrown a couple of punches, and anyone looking at my sorry state, well, those of my creased clothes, that is, would assume at once I'd been sleeping in them for days, which wasn't true, of course. I was wearing cool linen pants, and that was a very bad choice to make, for the material had crinkled up badly. I did want to look moderately respectable when we finally reached our destination, but I could see now that that was a wish that would not be fulfilled. My husband Gully had insisted on playing Leonard Cohen and Carly Simon on the trip all the way to the coast. I think he'd always fancied himself as a bit of a poet, so he was drawn to deep, meaningful lyrics that sometimes can be all too much when you don't want to think too deeply about anything at all. The sun glared at us obtrusively through the car windscreen window, as if its soulful intention was purposely to blind us. Regretfully, I'd foolishly left my dark glasses in my suitcase, which was in the back of the trunk. That lot of good they were for me right now. I couldn't help thinking, based on the grubby way I was feeling, that this was a day that was not going to end well. The silent signs were everywhere for me, pointing to a drama that would soon unfold in our reality. And it turned out that I would be right on this one. Indeed, this would be a day that I would never be likely to forget. It was a long time since I'd been on a long-suffering road trip such as this, and I'd forgotten what an abysmal and very poor traveller I was. For travelling over long distances was in no way fun. I know some people do it as a way of life for themselves, but personally I couldn't imagine anything worse. The bottle of water I was drinking was now lukewarm. During the journey I'd been unable to focus on my cell phone for entertainment, as the jolting, rocking motions of my husband's SUV had made me feel somewhat queasy. And my head had begun to thump, which was a warning sign, of course, that a migraine headache was well on its way, eager to offer me another punishing blow on this trip. I quickly pulled out a couple of pain relief pills from my purse, washing them down with a bottle of insipid water, hoping that my headache would be nipped in the bud before we finally reached my in-laws' gorgeous seafront home. And I'm glad to say the pills did the trick. I hate to have to admit that patience has never been one of my greatest virtues, and on this day it had worn very thin, as I began to twitch rather nervously in my seat, wishing with all my heart we could finally get to our destination, for the minutes dragged on laboriously, like a lifetime. I do remember when I was a girl at school, when I waited for that gong to sound so that the school day would finally be over. I would get out of those school gates faster than a Jack Russell in pursuit of a rabbit, let me tell you. Growing up, my mother would always be quick to point out that I was always in a rush to get to the finish line. When it came to accomplishing any task, even if I had done a half-hearted, cack-handed job just to get there, my mother would say, "For God's sake, Sandra, calm down, will you? Can't you take your time when you do things? You're always in such a tearing rush. And when you're like that, you're going to invariably overlook things, like the time when you made that chocolate cake, and you used salt instead of sugar, because you were in such a rush to get it completed. You need to take things one step at a time, dear. Do things methodically. Sometimes you can be like a bull in a china shop. You're just like your father in that regard, always needing to do things so quickly. I see it all the time when I'm driving on the road, you know. People tearing through the red lights to get to their destination a little faster. And sometimes their decision to rush and their raging impatience will cost them their lives. But it's not like that for me, I'd told my mother. I wouldn't risk my life to arrive at a destination in record time. But as I thought about this, that wasn't exactly true. If I could press down the accelerator of the car right now and race down all these roads just to get to the Finnegan home, that much quicker I'd probably have been tempted to do so, which would have been an accident waiting to happen, because some of the roads that we were embracing at the moment were pretty precarious. "That was not what I was trying to say, Sandra," my mother had said to me. "What I'm trying to say is you've got the kind of mentality that believes that everything should be done at record speed, like when you painted your bedroom yellow. I remember you came to me, insisting you wanted to paint the bedroom yellow. So I let you do it, thinking you would do a good job. But no, you rushed through everything, and did such a lousy job on that painting. So much so that I had to complete it for you. I had to repaint the entire bedroom." Suffice to say, I never did listen to my mother's advice, although I should have done so. I guess I was driven with an impulsive need to get things done at the speed of light, and try as I might to change this behaviour of mine, I simply couldn't rein it in, because my mother was right. I was exactly like my father. My mother knew I'd done a cack-handed job in painting my bedroom yellow that time, but doing things speedily, from my homework to chores, always meant I got them out of the way sooner. But more often than not, my intrinsic desire to rush all the time had never served me well. I still didn't learn from my mistakes, even as a grown-up woman. When Gully, who is my second husband, proposed to me, I was the one so excited to get married, but it had to be as soon as possible. So I persuaded him to fly to Vegas with me and to get married in one of those little chapels there, as I wanted to tie the knot as soon as we possibly could. It would seem even getting married in a tearing rush had felt like a good idea to me, especially when I considered Gully to be the man of my dreams, despite a plethora of faults that I had discovered in his personality that I would have liked to have changed. The worst, of course, being his inability to see how dreadfully hot the car was on this road trip, so that I was forced to suffer in silence, without any air conditioning. And then there was the inclination that Gully had to be ever so frugal about things from time to time. He will get upset, for example, if you accidentally leave the milk out of the refrigerator and it turns sour, because he can't bear waste, and is always concerned about the numbers in his pocketbook, and parting with too much cash. I can safely say my need to rush all the time has not been my most endearing quality, as far as Gully is concerned, especially when I was up at the crack of dawn on the first day of this road trip, persuading him to leave New York in the pitch dark 5 hours earlier than we intended, and he hadn't been amused by that, because he'd been hoping to gain a little bit more sleep. If I thought getting up early would mean we'd get to Oregon sooner, I was certainly mistaken about that. I guess you could say I'd come to the Oregon coast ill-prepared, in every sense of the word. The last time I'd come here, we'd flown here and hired a rental car once we arrived at the coast, but driving all the way to this rugged part of the coastline, with its high cliffs and precarious steep climbs, had been tumultuous to say the very least, although I cannot deny the fact that the scenery that swaddled us on every side was nothing short of spectacular. But I wouldn't expect anything less from the Oregon coast. By all accounts, in normal circumstances, if Gully and I were coming to the Oregon coast on our own to enjoy a 3-week vacation together, I'd have been absolutely over the moon about this trip, and all the leisurely time we could spend together, enjoying long walks along the coastline and breathing in the fresh briny air. But on the contrary, this time I was rather like a flustered pigeon that had had an altercation with the family tabby. I was terribly afraid of what kind of reception I would receive when we finally arrived at my in-laws' home. As Sonia Finnegan, Gully's mother, well, she's the most judgmental person I've ever had the privilege to meet. And my last visit to their home, when we first arrived here, well, it didn't go terribly well for me. I knew the first time Sonia Finnegan laid eyes on me that she didn't like me one little bit, for I failed to meet her exacting standards, which, believe me, are exceedingly high and unattainable, for not many women would likely be good enough for her son. I had courageously tried to put on a brave face for the duration of this trip, for the sake of Gully, but it certainly wasn't easy to wear an optimistic outlook on my person, like an extra layer of clothing. I stoically managed a half-hearted smile, but the fake happiness I planted on my face certainly did not meet the dread that was burgeoning up inside me, like a wild vine, suffocating everything in its wake. I tried, of course, to persuade myself that this time things would be different. Things last time were decidedly tense, as I'd only just met my in-laws for the very first time. My mother-in-law, Sonia, was still desirous that my husband, Gully, was still married to his first wife, Lydia, and that woman was still very much in the picture. So my rude intrusion into their lives, like an unwanted seagull dropping, splattering itself across the car windscreen window, and falling out of the sky like a fortuitous, nasty surprise, well, Sonia hadn't welcomed that at all. To all intents and purposes, I knew at the time Sonia and I were slowly getting acclimatized to each other, like when you introduce a new pet to your family home. And at first the other animals don't welcome the new addition very favourably, but after a while, when things begin to settle down, the animals get on famously. Could I dare to hope that would be the same for me and the pugnaciously belligerent Sonia Finnegan? I kept assuring myself that now that Sonia and I knew each other a little better, and she had got used to the idea of Gully having a brand new wife, surely some of the tight uneasiness would invariably shift, rather like a pair of elasticated pants that finally has some give after being worn and stretched countless times over. I wanted to believe this to be the truth, but deep down in my gut, a hollow, vacuous feeling was beginning to taunt me, accompanied by a still small voice that was warning me to be on high alert, and that my relationship with Sonia Finnegan would prove to be a lot more complicated than I'd first believed. Instinctively, I guess I always knew that things would not be different, for when does a leopard ever change its spots? I doubt my mother-in-law would have suddenly morphed into Cinderella's fairy godmother. She was more like the Wicked Witch of the West, if you were to liken her to a character in a children's fairy tale. It had been 6 months since I last saw Sonia Finnegan, and I was not looking remotely forward to seeing her again. Even if I never saw her again, it would probably have been too soon. I never, of course, shared those spiteful thoughts with my husband, who knew all too well how cantankerous and overbearing his mother could be at times. He didn't need me to point this out to him. He had been upset on our previous visit to his parents' home that there had been no love lost between me and his mother, which I imagine must have been very upsetting for him, as no man wants to come between his mother and his wife, the two women he loves, who are at each other's throats like a couple of fighting dogs. It would seem the closer we got to my in-laws' gloriously beautiful home on the Oregon coast, the less comfortable I became, as a feeling of impending dread consumed me. I nervously twitched as I shifted my position awkwardly in the passenger side seat, crossing one leg over another, and then changing it again and again, which has got to be exceedingly annoying for any driver. Gully was trying his level best to focus on navigating some of those precarious roads, with steep drops and high cliff faces that overlooked a beautiful blue coastline and a cloudless sky, where seagulls were cawing loudly, with wings outstretched as they circled the ocean. Gully glanced at me, raising a brow. "You keep shifting in your seat. An awful lot, as if you've got ants in your pants." "Oh, no," he sighed. "You're bursting to go to the toilet, aren't you? We only stopped a short while ago at a gas station. You went then. Surely you don't need to go again. You must have the bladder of an elephant, with a sprinkler system that is large enough to put out all the wildfires in California." If Gully thought he was being funny, I wasn't amused, nor was I laughing. The road trip had sucked my sense of humour dry, and sapped all the energy out of me. It didn't help that I felt the sweat trickling down my back, and my crumpled pink shirt sticking to my back like the cling film over a sweaty ham sandwich. When the hell would this trip ever be over? I wondered. It seemed to be going on forever, as if there was no end in sight. I scowled at Gully. I had become cranky. My good mood had dissipated like the steam from a kettle. I felt like one of those small yapping dogs that would have very much liked to have given Gully a good old nip at this point, and it would have given me a great deal of satisfaction to do just that. Possibly most of my grievances were really due to the thought of having to face my mother-in-law again, and just thinking of Sonia giving me one of her condescending looks. Well, that was making my blood run cold. I never imagined for a single moment that when I married Gully, I'd have a battle on my hands, and a treacherous mountain to climb, and that mountain was Sonia Finnegan herself. At this point in our long drawn-out journey, Leonard Cohen was annoyingly booming in my ears, and his deep raspy voice, along with the heat of the summer's day, had left me feeling deflated, rather like a burst balloon. I snapped at Gully and said, "Ha, ha, ha! That's so funny! Look at me, I'm really laughing! No, I don't need to go to the toilet if you must know. And for your information, I do not have the bladder of an elephant, and I resent you suggesting that I do, and that I could put out the wildfires in California with my pee. But if I could put out all the wildfires, I guess my services would be in high demand," I said sarcastically. "Good God, love! Look at you! You're so sullen. You look so miserable. You look rather like a cat that's been cooped up in a cage for days on end, without any food and water, that wants to scratch my eyes out. Can't a man make a joke? You've been moving a hell of a lot, love. You keep crossing your legs over and over again and shifting in your seat. What was I supposed to think? I came to the conclusion that you were desperate for the toilet." "Well, you would cross your legs 100 times over if you had to sit in a stuffy car like this, listening to Leonard Cohen in the searing heat. I feel stiff and exhausted from this journey. I'm not used to sitting in a passenger side seat for hours at a time. You know me. I'm impatient at the best of times. Don't I know it, said Gully, flashing me a cheeky, mischievous grin. You, Sandra, are the most impatient person I've ever met. But despite what you might think, there is an endearing charm in your urgency to rush all the time. He reached out and grabbed my hand, giving it a tight squeeze. When I asked you to marry me, the next thing I knew after you said yes, 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 you rushed me off to Vegas, didn't you? Booked that cute little ceremony for us, where the man who married us tried to impersonate Elvis Presley. Not very well, I might add. You bought that lovely bluish-white dress that made you look like you'd walked out of a fairy tale and were floating on air. You rushed out onto the street to grab a man to witness our wedding ceremony. And of all the men you picked, you chose a man who could barely stand up straight. I'm certain he was high on a cocktail of drugs. He was grinning manically during our whole ceremony, while we shared our vows together. Then the cheeky sod asked me if he could ride back with you in the fancy limousine to the hotel, as he'd like to spend some quality time with you. I had to remind him that I was the one that had married you and not him, and I had no intention of sharing my bride with him. The poor man looked so disappointed. I think he thought because he'd witnessed our wedding that he had some claim to you. When I gave him a couple of notes, well, he was a very happy man indeed, whistling away merrily to himself, as he imagined his next high, I imagine. It's funny, Sandra, but when I'm around you, I feel alive. Exciting things happen, and it's never been like that for me in the past. I'm a regular guy who lives a pretty humdrum, predictable life. But when you came along like a beautiful butterfly, it was like you stirred up the murky pond and turned the water crystal clear, and I love that about you. But I rushed you into that ceremony in Vegas, Gully. I didn't want you to change your mind about marrying me, I teased. I was worried when you found out what I was really like. You might just run a mile. Gully chuckled. You think I'd change my mind about you, Sandra? Never, never, not in a million months of Sundays. I struck gold when I met you. Yes, you've got some quirky habits, but haven't we all? And I've navigated my way around them. But I wouldn't change you for the world. You're a breath of fresh air in my life. There are lots of things I would change about you, Gully, I assured him. Quite a few, actually, now I come to think about it. Don't tell me. I'm well versed in what those things are. You wish I wasn't so frugal and would splash out on a few extravagances. And you wish that I would put air conditioning on in this car of mine, so that you wouldn't have to sweat all the way to the coast like a pig. Got it in a nutshell, I said, not mentioning that another thing I would change about my husband was his parents, most especially his mother Sonia. But instead of taking a jab at his mother, I just nonchalantly revealed how I was feeling about this trip. I wanted Gully to know that in the future this was not the way that I wanted us to travel to his parents' beachfront property. I never wanted to endure a long, insufferable road trip like this again. I wish we'd flown to the coast, Gully, like we sensibly did last time. I think driving here was a big mistake, a tedious thing for us to do. Let's not kid. It doesn't help that it's so very hot in this car of yours. No thanks to you, I said, feeling an irresistible sudden urge to express my extreme indignance about the lack of air conditioning in my husband's SUV. But I'd drummed my feelings about this into him long and hard, and it had made absolutely no difference at all. By all accounts, I'd have to be dying and gasping for breath before Gully would be generous and considerate enough to put on the air conditioning for me to enjoy. I had to put up with quite a lot with Gully, but I knew I was a very lucky woman to have married such a loving man, so some sacrifices are well worth making when it comes to the person you love. Gully sighed. I realized even he had become fatigued, worn out and defeated from the long road trip, and Gully is a long-suffering person who is much more patient than I ever am. He popped a cherry menthol lozenge into his mouth and glanced down briefly at his watch. We should be at my parents' place in an hour or so. Then you can stretch your legs as much as you like. We might actually be able to enjoy a long walk on the beach. We could take a stroll together. It's a beautiful day, is it not? And the coast is so lovely and serene. Look, there's not a single cloud in sight. Of course, that could change. The weather can be very temperamental here. I get why my parents retired here, you know. Who doesn't want to wake up every morning to enjoy pristine sea views like this every day, and enjoy leisurely walks on the beach? When my parents first moved here from New York, I was exceedingly doubtful about such a dramatic change of scene for them. I guess I considered my mother to be your quintessential city slicker. I mean, she's lived in New York all her life. She was born and raised here. She's used to the vibrant buzz of the city. I couldn't imagine her adjusting to another lifestyle. So when she left New York to come to the Oregon coast, I thought it was a crazy thing to do. I mean, she loved everything about New York. She had so many friends there. She'd go off to the theatre, to a music festival, or to cheese and wine tasting. She'd return home to her brownstone apartment with a plethora of shopping bags from exclusive designer boutiques, because that's what my mother loved to do. Well, I can believe that about your mother. She's definitely high maintenance. You're not wrong about that. You've never seen anyone shop like my mother. She loved shopping and attending all kinds of social events. So when she chose to settle down to a more quiet, subdued life on the Oregon coast, in a more sequestered area with superb views, well, in truth, I thought my mother would be bored out of her skull, would find life out here far too dull. But I was wrong about that. My parents have been here now for about 5 years. They've never been more happy. To be fair, my mother takes regular trips to New York when she gets the perennial itch to go shopping again and meet up with some of her old friends. But the good news is she's made plenty of friends out here. 2 of her girlfriends are New Yorkers, ex-New Yorkers. They've settled at the coast permanently, and that's worked out extremely well for my mother. She gets on with them like a house on fire because they have so much in common. Furthermore, moving out here, she got to design her own dream home, overlooking the beach. So maybe I shouldn't be surprised that she's so happy here. Correction, Gully, I reminded my husband. She may be happy living here at the coast, and I'm sure she is, but she'd be a whole lot happier if you were still married to Lydia. I know your mother absolutely hates me. I can tell by the way she looks at me. She really disapproves of me. Don't go there, babe. Please don't go there. Lydia was a whole nother chapter in my life that is well and truly over. Thank God for that. Yes, I admit my mother loved Lydia, and in her eyes Lydia could do no wrong. She sees me as the cad for ending my marriage with that woman prematurely. Lydia was the one that did the dirty on me. It was certainly not the other way round. But try telling that to my mother. It's like telling a flat earther that the earth is round. They refuse to listen to sound reasoning. They prefer to believe what suits their personal narrative, rather like so many politicians that are so biased and so partisan, they'll twist things to suit their own agenda. When I married Lydia, she and my mother became the very best of friends. They'd go shopping together and out for lunch. Lydia seamlessly mixed with my mother's circle of friends. So I guess when I ended things with Lydia, my mother was absolutely devastated. She had grown very attached to my ex-wife and regarded her as the daughter she never had. But your mother hates me, simply because I'm not Lydia. Go on, admit it, Gully. You know it's true. She thinks you made a catastrophic mistake in marrying me. Well, my mother is just going to have to learn to suck eggs, isn't she? If she chooses to engage in such stinking thinking. Well, I'm not going to tolerate it. You're the love of my life, aren't you, Sandra? And if my mother can't get on board with that, it's her problem, not ours. Give her time, babe. My mother's extremely set in her ways, very rigidly stiff about stuff. She was extremely fond of Lydia, and thought we'd be together forever. She's never been good with change, you know. But I think maybe after 3 weeks spent here with her at the beach, well, you and my mother, you never know, you might get on better. And maybe in time she'll be fussing over you like a mother hen, and end up loving you as much as she loved Lydia. Stranger things have happened. I snorted, making a scathing face. Like it really would happen. And my husband laughed. You're incorrigible, he teased. You look so cynical. Yes, my mother. Well, let's just say it. She's never been an easy woman. But everybody knows that. How my father has put up with her all these years, God only knows. I could never be married to someone like her. She's what's the word? Overbearing, insufferable, pompous, opinionated, self-entitled, I offered. I could go on if you like, I teased. That won't be necessary. I know what you think of my mother, babe. Word of advice. Just don't let her rub you up the wrong way. If she knows she's upset you, well, she might go in for the kill, if you know what I mean. Just hold your own, and don't let anything she says rile you up. Me and my father learnt that a long time ago. It's easier said than done, but I'm going to try my best to make your mother like me. That's not necessary, babe, said Gully, reaching out to squeeze my hand reassuringly. Be yourself, and in time you'll have that contrary mother of mine eating out of your hands, I'm most sure. I inwardly sighed, for it would seem talking about my husband's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Finnegan, was not a conversation I really wanted to have, as my memories of the first time I stayed in their beachfront property, only a couple of weeks after me and Gully got married, were far from pleasant. Sonia Finnegan had gone out of her way to make me feel most unwelcome, and the whole 3 days I'd spent in their house, I'd felt exactly like a fish out of water, as if I didn't really belong in their space. Sonia Finnegan had gone to the ends of the earth to show me how much she actively despised my presence in her home. She looked on me like you would look upon a cockroach if it had crawled into your shoe, with a large measure of repellent disgust. It didn't matter that I came from a small town in Vermont. Sonia Finnegan thought I was trailer trash, the kind of girl that had grown up with a mother who was a detestable drunk, and a disconnected, insouciant father who was never around. She created in her own head an objectionable narrative about my biological roots that seamlessly appeared to accommodate her snobby elitist attitude towards me. Over the course of those 3 insufferable oppressive days that I spent in her beachfront home, she had looked down on me in such a patronizing, uppity manner, and barely acknowledged my presence in her home, doing her utmost to avoid me. I had overheard her husband Connor taking his wife discreetly to one side in the living room of their home. I had heard them talking about me, as I was on my way back from the kitchen with a glass of milk in my hands, and I heard mention of my name, so it got my attention, and I very quietly tiptoed towards the doorway of the living room and eavesdropped in on their clandestine conversation, which affirmed what I already knew. Sonia Finnegan couldn't stand the very sight of me, and abhorred having me as a guest in her own home. Sonia, you're not treating our daughter-in-law right. She's Gulliver's new wife. Connor Finnegan was saying to her. Try to be nice to her, will you? You're making it perfectly clear you don't like her. That's not a kind thing to do. Actually, it's very nasty, vicious, insulting, and extremely offensive, giving her the silent treatment in the way that you are. How would you feel if my parents treated you so disparagingly, like this? I was grateful and somewhat surprised that Gully's father, Connor, was sticking up for me, as he was a quiet, very unassuming, polite man, who didn't contribute much to the conversation, so I knew very little about him, but it seemed he had seen in his wife a treatment towards me that he found objectionable. You think I should make the likes of that dreadfully ignorant piece of trailer trash welcomed in our home, do you, Connor? She's a traitor, don't you see that? Lydia belongs with Gully, not this ghastly woman that our son has the brazen audacity to call his wife. It's a joke. That's what this all is, an absolute joke. Whatever induced him to pick her up over any other woman, God only knows. Gully could have any girl he wants, and he chooses a woman like her. She's not even pretty. And as far as brains, I'm not sure she's actually got any. She doesn't give me the impression that she's got much going on upstairs. I mean, Lydia, well, she's got a master's degree, has she not? And she's so beautiful in every sense of the word. She's got style and oodles of taste. Lydia is a thoroughbred. As for Sandra, she's like a cart horse. Not much use at all. Love, listen to yourself. Your words are so unkind, so full of vicious spite. I don't care if Lydia has a master's degree. It doesn't mean a thing. Since when has a university degree ever defined your character? And as for beauty, Well, it isn't everything, you know. Although I think Sandra is an attractive woman, but not in the way you find a woman attractive. Because Sandra is not sophisticated enough for you. I get that you loved Lydia, and she was a nice enough girl, but she did wrong, by golly. You've never admitted that, have you? You need to realize, Sonia, that our son has moved on with his life. He's fallen madly in love with another woman, who is the antithesis of Lydia in every sense of the word. She's more wholesome. She seems to have a big heart. You have callously decided to hate her simply because she's not Lydia. Isn't your attitude a bit extreme? How can you say that, Connor? Are you trying to insult my intelligence or something? I'm doing nothing of the kind, love. God forbid. I'm just pointing out the facts. I don't think it would have mattered who Gully brought home with him. If you want the truth, I don't think it would have mattered who Gully brought home with him. You would have hated every single woman that he introduced us to as his wife, if they weren't Lydia. You are also extremely crushed that you weren't invited to Gully's wedding in Vegas, so you're blaming his new wife for it. You do realize that both Gully and Sandra are divorcees. They decided they wanted a small, little, simple affair in Vegas. There's nothing wrong with that. For a second wedding, you don't need a fuss, nor any extra expense. It's a frivolous thing to do, totally unnecessary. I think going off to Vegas to get married was a practical decision for them to make, and a sensible one too. But then you would say that, Connor, wouldn't you? Because you're just like Gully in that regard. You love to save any penny you can, said Sonia Finnegan, crying out indignantly. You haven't got a clue what on earth you're saying, Connor. You're always jumping to wild conclusions. It's so typical of you. And you get everything dead wrong for your information. You can live in denial, sweetheart, for as long as you like. But I know you better than you know yourself. You're completely outraged. I can see it in your face. You are upset because we aren't included in our son's wedding. Well, we weren't included. You feel snubbed that we weren't invited to Vegas, and upset when he announced he'd met someone else that we knew nothing about. Go on, admit it. You were put out about it all. But this is not about you, love. It's about our son and his lovely new bride. How dare you say I'm in denial, Connor? Said Sonia fiercely, the tone of her voice extremely defensive. If you are wondering why Gully was so secretive about the new woman in his life, I'll tell you why, said Mr. Finnegan. He didn't want you coming along, throwing a spanner in the works, destroying his new relationship. He knew you'd be upset that he was getting remarried, so he decided to go off to get married in Vegas, and to be done with it. And frankly, I don't blame him. I'd have done much the same if I was wearing his shoes. He told you this? Asked Sonia's astonished voice. Did he actually tell you this? No, he didn't. I guessed as much. I know what you're like, love, all too well. As far as you are concerned, no one is good enough for our Gully, except Lydia, of course. You're incredibly biased as far as Lydia is concerned, and it's ridiculous. I like Lydia very, very much. She was like a daughter to me. But this dreadful woman, this impostor that our son has brought into our home, I don't like her at all. I blame her for guilefully whisking Gully off to Vegas like that. It's such a tacky thing to do. I wouldn't expect anything less from a girl like her. And to think she's married our son. Oh, it's too horrifying for words, it really is. She's not the kind of woman I want for a daughter-in-law. It seems that Gully's taste in woman has fallen by the wayside. He's completely lost his way. He's chosen someone so dreadfully plain, so unfashionable in every sense of the word. She doesn't even wear makeup. Someone who wouldn't know a Louis Vuitton purse from a copy. Well, if you must know, I like the fact that Sandy is a fresh-faced young woman that doesn't engage in any airs and graces like Lydia so obviously did. And who cares a toss if she doesn't know an authentic designer purse from a copy? That's a very, very silly thing to be concerned over. The only thing that's horrifying to you is that Gully is not with Lydia anymore. You can't get over the fact that it's over between the two of them, and it's eating you up alive. So you think spitting out your venom at Sandra is going to drive her away from Gully? But I hate to break this to you, love. Anyone can see that the two of them are very much in love. You're going to have a tough time if you try to split them up, let me tell you. They think they're in love. There is a difference, you know. Gully really loves Lydia. I know he does. He's just refusing to admit it to himself because he's hurt. But he doesn't realize how very good Lydia was for him, and how much he's lost. It's not over between them, I know it isn't, said Sonia Finnegan firmly. If Gully would just open his eyes, he might begin to realize what he had with Lydia. Why he threw her to the curbside so heartlessly, I cannot understand. But I'm hoping with time he will realize what an idiot he's been. Gully is remarried, love. I hate to break that to you, but it needs to sink into that head of yours. He has a new wife, and he's very happy, thank you very much. And the sooner you accept that, Sonia, the better. I may remind you that Lydia did the dirty on Gully, came Connor Finnegan's frustrated response. He sounded somewhat aggrieved that he couldn't get through to his wife Sonia, for it was rather like talking to a brick wall, as in Sonia Finnegan's eyes, Gully's ex-wife Lydia was still very much on top of a pedestal. How many times do I have to remind you, Sonia, that Lydia betrayed Gully's trust by sleeping with his very best friend? Now you don't do something like that. You seem to conveniently forget all that, and I'm sorry, but it's a very big deal. I wouldn't be with you any more, Sonia, if you had slept with my very best friend. That's how these things work. You wouldn't be with me, is that what you're saying, if I'd slept with your best friend? You wouldn't forgive me? Of course I wouldn't forgive you. The trust would be gone, that would be the problem. I'd like to think I had a little self-respect. Is it any surprise the relationship between Gully and Lydia is over? I don't mean to be unkind, love, but quite frankly, you're stuck in a time warp, and you're going to be left far behind if you harp on nostalgically about the past in the wistful way you do, and try and act as if nothing has changed, when everything has changed. If you are very aloof and insouciant towards Sandra, you're not going to exactly endear yourself towards Gully. Wishing things are different all the time. You need to accept Gully is in love with Sandra. You cannot dictate who our son loves. It's not your decision to make. Gully has got a mind of his own. I know that, Connor. I'm not stupid. But at the same time, I am Gully's mother, and I'd like to think that my opinion counts for something. Sorry to burst your bubble, Sonia, but you have no say in the matter, and your opinion does not count. Not any more. Your influences over Gully's life are at best paper-thin, and will get increasingly more fragile if you continue to act like you are, like a sulky, petulant teenager. Your attitude towards Sandra is both juvenile and childish, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Our son is an adult now, a fully grown man. Some of the choices he's going to make in his life may not please you. It's the way for every parent out there. Ask any parent you like, and they will tell you that when their kids grow up, they can't tell them who to vote for in the elections, who to socialize with, what job to accept, where to go on holiday, or who to marry, or how many children to have. You have to accept the fact, love, that our son is not a boy anymore. He's the conductor of his own symphony, playing all the tunes that suit him best, and some of his choices you're not going to agree with. Just like you and I, although we love each other very much, we don't agree on everything, do we? Can you not at least be happy for Gully? And please be kind to his new wife. She seems a nice enough girl to me, but all you can do is pick fault at her, and it's not her fault she's not Lydia. I've noticed you, Sonia, giving her dagger looks, making her feel most unwelcome in our home, and you should never do that to a wife of our son's, who I may remind you could potentially become the mother of our future grandchildren. You need to see the bigger picture, love. I am seeing the bigger picture, Connor. I happen to think that our son was much more suited to Lydia, but he's far too stubborn to see it. You can live in denial as much as you like, Sonia, but your wistful dreams of getting Lydia and Gully back together will never work. I can tell you that right now. Would it really hurt you to be civil to our new daughter-in-law? Gully knows you don't like his new wife. You've made that painfully clear by sulking and actively ignoring her. And when you speak to Sandra, you're extremely condescending. When she arrived here, you were practically telling her how to disguise her tree-trunk legs. That's an insult, love. She's not a heffalump and you know it, but you insinuated as much. I dare say it's very upsetting for Gully to see you treat the woman he loves with so much disdain. If Sandra were to treat you like you are treating her, I would be very upset about that. If you continue in this manner, treating Sandra with so much disrespect, then I very much suspect Gully's visits to our home will become few and far between. And I'm sure you wouldn't like that, would you, Sonia? Think about it. Why would Gully want to visit us if you made it blatantly obvious you hate his brand new wife? It's true. I do wish Sandra was Lydia. But can you blame me for that? Sonia admitted. Lydia is so perfect. She's beautiful, classy, elegant, upmarket. Sandra, well, she's a little dumpy, don't you think? Not nearly as beautiful as Lily is. I couldn't believe Sandra claimed to have won the field and track when she was a kid at school. Can you believe that? I wonder if she made that story up. She doesn't look at all athletic. I mean, honestly, look at her now. She probably wouldn't even manage the egg and spoon race without carelessly dropping the egg. She doesn't strike me as desperately nimble. I'm sorry to say this, Connor. It's like our son has downgraded from a Rolls-Royce to a clapped-out Peugeot with an engine that is seriously impaired because there's so much gunk inside it. When I heard my mother-in-law saying that about me, I hurriedly scurried away. I'd heard enough. But I do remember closing the bathroom door behind me, putting on the taps at full blast, so no one could hear my sobbing. It hurt me to the quick hearing my new mother-in-law describing me in this fashion. It was so vindictively unkind, so heartless, and it really stung me to the core. I did not even want Gully to know what his mother had said about me, as he would have gone after her all guns blazing, telling her not to upset me, and giving her a huge telling off. I really didn't want to create any more chaos or discord over a 3-day weekend, when I was getting to know my in-laws better, and trying to make Sonia see that I wasn't such a bad person. So I kept what I'd heard to myself. I had no idea what Lydia looked like or anything about the woman, but it really hurt being compared to her, as it would seem Sonia Finnegan thought Lydia was perfection itself. I had heard her describe me as dumpy, and yes, I admit I was a few pounds overweight, but I was just a little plump, in a Bridget Joneses-like kind of way. But Gully found me beautiful, and that was all that counted as far as I was concerned. Besides, you can lose weight, can't you? But you can't always lose a stinky attitude, the one that Sonia Finnegan was so obviously engaging in. She may not have liked me terribly much, but the feeling was definitely mutual. How could I warm up to a woman whose heart was as cold as ice? I vividly recall the first time I met Sonia Finnegan. I had been nervous as anyone else would likely be in meeting their in-laws for the very first time. Mrs. Finnegan had not exactly been kindly disposed towards me, even before I arrived on the scene. So I wasn't expecting a rapturous welcome, especially since me and Gully had gone off to get married at a ceremony in Vegas, and the only person to witness our wedding was a complete stranger off the street, who we had invited to join the ceremony, and as Gully pointed out, the man was as high as a kite, which in itself was hilariously funny, now that I come to think about it. When Gully announced to his mother that he'd met someone and just got married over a phone call, Mrs. Sonia Finnegan was not remotely amused, and it sounded like she was quite affronted and put out by this shocking revelation. I think she felt cheated, as if she and her husband Connor had been deliberately discluded from an important ceremony. But both me and Gully were divorcees, and so a fancy wedding would not have been on the cards for us, for we had absolutely no desire to splash out on a wedding ceremony with all the trimmings, as that would be an excessive unnecessary expense. What would be the point of that? Besides anything else, we'd been there, done that, and got the T-shirt. We didn't want to have a big bash, which of course pleased Gully, as he hated parting with extra money. But he can be generous at times when he chooses to splash out on me. But I had teased him on countless occasions for being so dreadfully penny-pinching. But pulling the reins in financially on a second wedding, That I could completely understand, as weddings are frivolous at the very best of times, and we didn't need to be frivolous about ours. When Gully called his mother to tell her the news that we were now married, he had put his cell phone on speaker, and then he broke the news to her. But judging by her horrified reaction, anyone would have thought someone in the family had died in a calamitous tragedy. "What is that you're saying, Gulliver?" Everyone I knew called my husband Gully, so I chuckled when I heard him being called by his full birth name. But I was to learn later that Sonia Finnegan could not stand her son being called Gully. But there were times when she slipped up and accidentally called him the shortened version of his name, when she was off guard, and when she did that, she seemed to scold herself. "I was saying, Mum, I've got some great news. Very good news, in fact. I met a girl." "You met a girl?" came Sonia's voice, followed by a stiff, uncomfortable silence. "So you've got yourself a new girlfriend, have you, Gully? Isn't that a bit soon after Lydia? I mean, you've barely just got divorced, and you've flung yourself into another relationship. Isn't that far too soon, love? You need to take things very slowly, one step at a time. Rushing into things is a very big mistake, and I personally don't encourage impulsiveness of any kind, if you want my wizened advice on this matter. Mum, I'd like to remind you I divorced Lydia over a year and 6 months ago. That was quite a long time ago, don't you think? I need to move on, start a new life for myself, put the past finally behind me. There's no point in dwelling on past mistakes and looking back. I'm sorry to say, Gulliver, but I always thought your ending the marriage so quickly with Lydia was an overreaction on your part, and as a consequence you lost the very best thing that ever happened to you. Lydia was an asset. She never meant to get drunk that night, and the only reason she did was because you had upset her so much. Can you blame the poor woman for being so distressed? You really laid into her, Gulliver, going on and on about her being excessively extravagant. She was begging you to get the kitchen refurbished, for goodness sake, which I quite understand in the circumstances, but you put your foot down, didn't you? Made a song and dance about it all. You obviously don't understand that to make a woman happy, you should give in to what she wants, just a little bit. And had you done so, this dreadful debacle would never have happened in the very first place, and Lydia would not have been tempted to cheat on you. It was a dreadful misunderstanding, love, that you took far too far. Mum, she did a hell of a lot more than kiss my very best friend, and you know it. She went home with him. She was gone for a couple of days, and she'd have been sober by then. She returned home 2 days later, expecting me to take her back and forgive her for sleeping with my very best friend. Credit me with a little dignity, will you, Mum? You really think I'm going to take Lydia back, when she spent an entire weekend warming up another man's bed and crying on his shoulders because I refused to refurbish a brand new, perfectly adequate, well-presented kitchen at excessive unnecessary cost? How low can you get? It was a mistake, love. Why didn't you realize that Lydia has always loved you? She made one little mistake. Drink can do that to people, you know. Lower their inhibitions. But Lydia was so good for you, love. Such an upstanding woman, in every sense of the word. If you call cheating on me upstanding, Mum, then we've got different ideas on what the word actually means. You were always biased as far as Lydia was concerned. She could never do anything wrong in your eyes. That's not true, San, and you know it. So tell me about this girl you've met. How long have you been seeing her, love? Well, for a year, to be precise. A year? And you didn't think to mention this to me? Gulliver, that's appalling of you. Absolutely appalling. You've been with this woman for a year, and you don't tell me. I'm your mother, for goodness sake. If anyone should be privy to know what's going on in your life, it should be me. But these days you're so elusive. Everything you do, Gully, is shrouded in secrecy, and I don't like it one little bit. When people ask me how you're doing, Gully, I don't know what to say to them, because you never get in touch with me these days. And that's very naughty of you. Well, there was nothing to tell you, Mum. That's why I didn't contact you. But now there is. I've got some great news, Mum. Very exciting news as it happens. I hope you can be happy for me. What news is this, love? Why have I got a funny feeling I'm not going to like what you're about to tell me? I'm married, Mum. You what? Came Sonia Finnegan's voice. She sounded as if she was choking on a piece of sausage that had got dislodged in the back of her throat. You heard me, Mum. I got married. I'm very happy. I'm very much in love with my new wife. She's a very beautiful woman. I think you will like her very much. She'll be a great fit for our family. And if you know what I think, I'm very glad things didn't work out between me and Lydia. As Sandra, she brings out the best in me. I'm a better man because of her, and a whole lot less stingy. I've been buying her flowers and gifts, and for me to do that, well, it's a breakthrough, isn't it? You've got married, Gulliver. Are you completely insane? You've only recently come out of a marriage, and now you've entered into another one, on a whim. At this rate, you'll end up exactly like Elizabeth Taylor, having more ex-wives than you know how to count. I didn't get married on a whim, Mum. I'm in love. I told you, I'm very happy. And you thought not to invite me and your father to the wedding. I'm very disappointed in you, Gulliver. I feel extremely hurt by all of this. Very hurt. Mum, I had a big wedding with Lydia, didn't I? At great unnecessary expense. I may remind you of that. And then the relationship went pear-shaped. I thought this time around I would do things differently. So we went to Vegas and did it that way. It was inexpensive and a great deal of fun. We had a fabulous time together, and I don't regret any of it. Oh, I despair with you, Gulliver. I really do. What on earth were you thinking? What about your new wife? Did you stop to think for a single moment that she might have enjoyed a big white wedding with all the trimmings? Weddings are very important, you know, to a woman. And it's incredibly selfish of you to consider your own needs first, over and above hers. You've always been very tight, just like your father with the purse strings. Oh, goodness gracious. That's one of the reasons your relationship with Lydia fell apart. I mean, she was so frustrated by how tight you were. Sandra didn't want a fancy wedding, Mum. She had a fancy wedding with all the trimmings with her ex-husband, so she wanted a simpler event like I did. Please be happy for me, Mum. You will really like Sandra, I promise you. She's a lovely girl. I can't wait for you to meet her. I know the two of you will get on famously. You're going to absolutely love her. She's a little shy when you first meet her, if you don't know her very well. But when you get to know her, she's got the warmest heart. I hit the jackpot marrying her, I'm telling you. So she's a divorcee, is she? Came Mrs. Finnegan's disgusted voice. Why is she divorced? I hope you found out the reason why she and her husband separated, Gulliver. It could be very revealing about her character. I mean, if she gave up on her first marriage so easily, just like you did with Lydia, all I can say is God help the both of you, because you're going to need supernatural help, let me tell you, to make things work. Marriage is a commitment for life, you know, Gulliver. It is to be taken seriously. You don't just bow out at the first opportunity. Her husband cheated on her 5 days after their wedding, Mum, with a matron of honour. Can you believe that? It was absolutely devastating for her. She was committed to her marriage, but sadly her husband failed her, because he obviously wasn't. She couldn't make it work under those circumstances. How perfectly disgraceful, said Mrs. Finnegan, sounding all the more revulsed. Your wife can't be a very good judge of character, Gulliver, to marry someone so willing to cheat on her like that. Either that, or she has a considerably low self-esteem. You know very well, if your father cheated on me, I wouldn't stand for his nonsense. I'd take him down with a cricket bat as hard as I possibly could. He wouldn't know what had hit him. I'd probably bury him under the patio, like they do in the movies, with badly behaved husbands. Let's just say, your dad wouldn't dare humiliate me like that. Mum, she was young at the time, inexperienced and naive. She married this guy because she was pregnant, if you must know. She has a child, came Mrs. Finnegan's strained voice, that sounded as if there were now several sausages stuffed at the back of her throat. You're kidding me! So you're a stepfather as well as a newly married man for the second time around. How old is this child? Sonia Finnegan sounded as if she was about to be violently sick. No, Mum, you've got it wrong. Sandra, I'm afraid, does not have any children. Tragically, she lost that baby. In a miscarriage. It was devastating for her. She was only 18 years old when she married her ex, and shortly after the wedding day she lost the baby. It broke her heart. She was looking forward to becoming a mother. But I guess she was so upset at the time that her body simultaneously rejected the baby. Stress can do that to your body, as you well know. 18 years old? Who gets married at 18 years old, I ask you? With a bun in the oven as well? It's appalling, that's what it is. Does this woman you've married have the morals of an alley cat or something? Because it certainly sounds like it. I didn't even know how to kiss a boy at 18 years old. And it appears that she's jumping into bed with everyone she can find, like a dog on heat. It's utterly disgusting. Mum, Sandra does not have the morals of an alley cat. I resent your insinuations. You don't even know her. She decided getting married was the best thing to do in the circumstances, as she didn't want the baby to grow up without a father. Her parents are very religious, you see, and they persuaded her that getting married was the best thing for the baby. And so that's what she did, even though it turned out to be a train smash. The guy she married had nothing in common with her, and well, she didn't even like him all that much. Good grief, love! It sounds like she's made a great deal of mistakes in her young life, and some very bad choices along the way. You don't have to marry someone just because you're pregnant, you know. Maybe in the olden days people did that, but we've moved on from the Stone Ages, have we not? If the man was so obviously a loser, he would have messed up their marriage sooner or later. Once a toe rag, always a toe rag as far as I'm concerned. So a sensible woman, with sound reasoning, would never have married the loser in the first place. There is nothing wrong, you know, Gulliver, with being a single mum. I know plenty of single mothers out there, and they do a fine job at raising their children. There's no reason why your wife couldn't have raised that child on her own, with the help of her parents. One doesn't have to leap into marriage these days. Sandra was young, callow at the time, Mum. So yes, she's made some mistakes. And poor choices, but haven't we all? She's 30 now. She's the same age as me. She's been single since she was 18. So she's been very selective about who she's dated over the years. Well, I'm very relieved to hear you didn't go marrying an 18-year-old. For a moment I thought that was coming next, and that there would be a significant age gap between the two of you, which would have been a disaster waiting to happen. In my experience, few relationships survive a gaping big generation gap. It's like having a hole in your sock. Things never fit right. So how did she find her husband was cheating on her? As I assume he hid his infidelity from her well, being treacherously calculating like he so obviously is. Well, it was simple, really, if you must know, Mum. She went to visit her best friend, who was the matron of honour at her wedding. She was bringing her friend a present to thank her for her role she had played on their wedding day, and for her support. They had always been very close, like I was with my best friend until he did the dirty on me with Lydia. So our stories, ironically, are not unsimilar. Sandra got the shock of her life when she saw her husband's very distinctive bright red Jeep parked outside her best friend's house. She said she was overcome with a funny feeling that something very funny was up. Well, I'm not surprised. If I found your father's car parked outside my best friend's house, I would smell a very stinky rat. But luckily, I'm very fortunate because all my best friends would never betray my trust like your wife's best friend so obviously did. Who needs enemies if you have fair-weather friends like that? Good grief, the story gets worse by the second, let me tell you. Mum, please don't go there. Don't be so mean and unkind. I'm sure Sandra thought her friend could be trusted, but her friend was 18 at the time, was ignorantly naive, as she was. I guess her loyalty went flying out of the window. I understand all of Sandra's friends fancied her husband. He was very good-looking, I believe, and they drooled over him like ice cream sundaes. Oh, honestly, goodness gracious, Gulliver. I would say her best friend did more than let her down. Your wife must be an extremely poor judge of character. to befriend people who would backstab her like that so obviously. It's a disgrace, an absolute disgrace, that's what it is. So, well, what happened? Did she catch them in the act? Please, God, don't tell me she did. I couldn't imagine anything worse. Just thinking about it makes me physically squirm. If I saw your father with another woman, I would squat her like a fly and kill your father at the very same time. Take them both out. You know me. I'd never put up with nonsense of any kind. That's why your father is very well trained. He would not dare press any of my buttons. Well, she had a key to her best friend's house, because she house-sits for her friend's ginger cat called Toby. So she let herself into the house, and heard strange noises coming from the bedroom. So she walked straight in, and there they were, otherwise engaged, so to speak, in a little hanky-panky, shall we say. Good Lord! What a dreadful, dreadful man! The poor woman was pregnant with his baby. He bogs off with the matron of honour, without so much as a bye or leave, 5 days after their wedding, to have his dirty little way with her behind his wife's back, while she's going through the most vulnerable time in her life carrying that baby. He sounds like a prize cad to me, in every sense of the word. He should be ashamed of himself. It's like something out of a Jerry Springer show. Your wife doesn't happen to have lived in a trailer, does she? Please, God, don't tell me you've married a woman who grew up in a trailer park. I don't think my heart could stand it if she came from that kind of impoverished background where anything goes to raise a buck or two. I mean, what would people think if they knew my son had married a loose woman? Mum, stop being so dramatic, will you? Relax. Sandra is not a loose woman, nor did she grow up in a trailer park. And so what if she did? Would it make her any less of a person? It's no blight to her character. So stop being such a dreadful snob. If you must know, Sandra comes from a small town in Vermont and was raised in a loving middle-class Christian family. I've met both of her parents and her 2 sisters, and the family are delightful. The whole lot of them are. They're well-educated, decent people. I hope that meets with your approval, Mum. Or is middle class not good enough for you? Don't be so reactive, Gulliver. I'm only asking, love. I mean, if your wife was well-educated, would she have made such poor choices, I ask you? I can't help but wonder about that. Unless, of course, well, she's not desperately bright, if you know what I mean. Mum, Sandra is very bright. She was 18 at the time. Cut her some slack, will you? She was a teenager. You know what teenagers are like. They don't always make the wisest decisions. Besides all that, her parents were extremely religious, and they did not want her to have an abortion. She was dead set against it, as were they. I think she really believed she could make the marriage work, for the baby's sake. To her credit, at least she gave her marriage a fighting chance, which is more than can be said for a lot of other girls. Did she even love that man, I wonder, Gulliver? Well, she didn't know him very well. He does have a name, Mum. His name was Ed Slater. They had seen each other a couple of times, and then she fell pregnant. They decided to make a go of things, but things sadly didn't work out for them. Good grief, son. The story gets more and more Jerry Springer-like by the second. Your wife married a man she barely knew because he impregnated her. Because she threw herself at him. That's a foolish thing to do. Incredibly naive. If she was going to sleep with every single man on the planet, did she at not least have some birth control at her disposal? Did her mother not at least give her some advice on how to conduct herself around very frisky men? I'm sorry, son. I'm saying it as it is. Mum, it happened a long time ago. It's all water under the bridge now. Let's move on, shall we? Well, I hope for your sake, Gulliver, it is water under the bridge. Because for your information, water has the unfortunate capacity to do an insane amount of damage, especially if it comes back to haunt you in a flood of chaos. I've seen it all too often in people's relationships, you know. And frankly, Gulliver, I'm very disappointed and very disheartened that you chose to clandestinely get married to this woman, without including me or your father in the ceremony that you went to in Vegas. Fair enough, I understand if you wanted a small event. I can respect that, to a certain extent. But not including us in the ceremony. on such an important day in your life makes me feel as if me and your father have been snubbed. And that really hurts, love. Really hurts. Mum, it wasn't clandestine. One of the reasons I didn't tell you I was getting remarried is I knew the news would upset you. If you had your way, you would have encouraged Lydia and I to reconcile the old flame and try again. And I'm sorry, that's never going to happen. You've always thought that Lydia could do no wrong. I've got news for you, Mum. Lydia really hurt me, cheating on me in the way she did. I don't care a jot if she was inebriated. There is no excuse for her behaviour. Beyond that, she completely destroyed the relationship I had with my best friend, because I haven't spoken to him since. Well, it's too late now to persuade you to make up with Lydia, isn't it, son? You've made that painfully clear. You've only gone and married somebody else. I hope to God you know what you're doing, Gulliver. Anyway, I must go. I have to break this very sensitive news to your father, and frankly, I do not know how he's going to take it. I'm sure he'll be fine, Mum. Dad's never been that social. He's probably secretly relieved he didn't have to fly all the way to Vegas to witness our wedding. I'm sure I spared him a lot of grief and unnecessary expense. Because, like me, he's also shrewd with his pocketbook and doesn't like spending too much money, apart from where you're concerned. So when are we going to meet this wife of yours, Gulliver? Are you going to keep us in the dark indefinitely, or are we going to see you soon? Don't you worry, Mum. I'll bring her to stay with you and Dad next weekend. You'll love her. We'll come up to the coast for 2 or 3 days. How about that? Very well. I'll see you then. I do remember when Gully finished his phone call with his mother. I rushed into his arms for comfort, bursting into tears, for I certainly hadn't liked the way that Sonia Finnegan had talked about me with so much disdain. But then again, when Gully had shared with her details of my background, I did have to admit that Sonia Finnegan had a point. My story did sound rather like something out of a Jerry Springer show. I privately wished that Gully hadn't told his mother so many of these sordid, unsavoury details about my life, and my whimsical naivety to boot, as I was absolutely certain that she was the kind of woman who would happily use my past mistakes against me, to run my integrity into the ground, like a 4-wheeler truck running over a dead rabbit, crushing it so hard that nothing is left behind. "Your mother doesn't like me, Gully," I had cried out. "She absolutely hates me. I could absolutely hear it in her voice. Her disdain was so clear to me. She thought I grew up in a trailer. Can you believe that? She thinks I'm the lowest of the low in society, just because I made a mistake and slept with a boy at 18 years old when I was slightly inebriated. She thinks I'm disgusting." Gully chuckled, lifting my chin to his face, brushing away my tears with the back of his thumb. "Of course my mother's grievously upset," he reasoned with me. "She's not remotely amused, is she, with the 2 of us going off and getting married without her knowledge or say-so? You heard her yourself. She's deeply affronted by our behaviour. But I didn't want her to be included in our private ceremony. She's an interfering busybody. She would have fussed too much, tried to come between the 2 of us if she possibly could, to break us apart. I couldn't let that happen. I know how obsessed my mother is with my ex-wife Lydia. She goes on about Lydia, as if I was the one that did the dirty on her, when it was the other way round. So my announcing I got married again, well, it throws my ex-wife Lydia right out of the picture for good, does it not? My mother doesn't like that one single bit. For her, in an ideal world, she'd have clandestinely brought us together in some way, at the earliest possible convenience, no doubt with some kind of guileful plan to rekindle the flame. So my announcement that I'm remarried has blown the wind out of her sails, and crushed her hope for my relationship with Lydia, so to speak." "So your mother hates me then, even before I get to meet her, because I've replaced Lydia, and she's not going to be happy about that at all. I'm the enemy, am I not?" "My mother hasn't spoken to Lydia since we got divorced. But let me tell you, Lydia wasn't as perfect as my mother claims. There was an insidious dark side, I'm afraid to say, to Lydia's character, which began to reveal itself to me shortly after we got married. I remember when she admitted to cheating on me. There was a manic, deranged grin on her face, almost as if she loved seeing the pain she had caused me, as if in some way going to bed with my best friend was her revengeful way of getting her back at me, because I refused to get a brand new kitchen refurbished. It was her kind of way of being revengeful, I suspect, but I don't think for a single moment she thought I'd end our marriage in a heartbeat, which I did. She was delusional like that. Even if my mother wanted me to rekindle the flame with Lydia, it would never have happened, Sandra. You're the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I want you to know that. Yes, my mother might feel indignant and affronted that I married someone else, but I'm quite sure when she gets to meet you, she will appreciate you as much as I do, and see what a magnificently beautiful woman you are, on the inside and out. There is no way she hates you. How can you possibly hate someone you've never met? She doesn't even know you. Well, she hates the idea of me, doesn't she? So I've got to be the enemy to her, I reminded Gully. She hates the fact that you've moved past Lydia and on to someone new, especially someone with a history like mine. Well, my mother's going to have to get used to it, isn't she? There's nothing wrong with your background, love. We've all done things in our lives we regret, especially when we were younger. And my mother's made her mistakes, believe me. Gully had assured me at the time that of course both his parents would love me, and his assertive confidence that this would indeed be the case had ill-prepared me for meeting my in-laws. I was certain that Sonia would be nurturing a secret grudge towards me, for I had replaced the woman she loved as her daughter-in-law. Gully had told me that no, I didn't need to wear anything smart or formal for our first meeting. Yes, my scruffy jeans with the fashionable tears on the knees, and my white sweatshirt with a gold logo that read, "Go for your dreams," would be perfectly satisfactory to wear for the occasion, for no one dresses up for the coast. So in truth I didn't bother too much about my appearance, assuming from what Gully had told me about his parents that they were relaxed, carefree and easy-going by nature. Not that his mother sounded like that in any way on the phone, of course, but just because she appeared posh and rather elitist didn't mean she actually was. Voices can sometimes be extremely misleading. Gully had made me believe his parents were the kind of people that didn't stand on ceremony and welcomed anyone into their home very warmly, never judging them for a crumpled shirt or a splatter of mud on their white sneakers, perhaps. Even if his mother Sonia obviously condemned people, such as myself, for some of the poor choices they had made in their lives. But how you dressed, no, that didn't matter a jot, according to Gully. It turned out to the contrary that first appearances rarely did matter to Sonia Finnegan, and I don't think her very first impressions of me were at all favourable. I deeply regretted not having worn something a lot more elegant, as Sonia Finnegan's focus seemed to linger on the knee area of my jeans for far too long, and there was certainly a look of horror embedded on her face. I then realised that Sandra Finnegan thought the fashionable tears in the fabric of my jeans were actually there because my jeans were very old, and I hadn't bothered to replace them. She didn't seem to realise that it was a fashion trend. Her generation was obviously not privy to that, as I don't think tears in jeans would be to Sandra Finnegan an idea of a fashion statement. I remember being exceedingly annoyed with Gully and his failure to warn me about how formidable his mother really was in the flesh. I could not believe he had failed to mention what a judgmental cow she really was, and that if it wasn't toffee stuck up her nose, then it was something equally as sticky, as that woman's snobby, superior attitude was extremely vulgar to me, in every sense of the word. When I met Sonia for the first time, I never for a moment suspected her to be so obviously unwelcoming to me. I was wife number 2, and Sonia Finnegan didn't like that at all. She hated the fact that Gully's first wife, Lydia, had been replaced with the likes of me. She had made her disapproval and disappointment poignantly clear. From the moment I walked over the threshold of the Finnegans' front door, I felt like a small dog that had been cornered by an aggressive bull mastiff. Well, to be fair, when it comes to Gully's parents, Mr. Finnegan had been polite and reasonably friendly towards me. He had welcomed me warmly into their abode. He'd asked me about the flight we'd taken, as well as congratulating us for our wedding in Vegas. But Sonia, well, she was altogether a different kettle of fish. She was like a stingray, with a great big sharp barb that she'd have probably liked to jab straight into me if given a chance. I knew from the moment that Sonia laid eyes on me, and the disapproving once-over she cast over me, that I was not the kind of girl she'd have ever chosen for her son in a million months of Sundays. But if the truth be told, I don't think any woman that Gully would have brought home would have compared with his ex-wife Lydia in Sonia's very pretentious eyes. When Mrs. Finnegan had thrown her arms around Gully, it was as if she was greeting the prodigal son. She practically ignored me until Gully said, "Mum, this is Sandra, my wife." "Oh, yes, you did mention on your phone call that you rushed off to get married, didn't you, Gully? Let's take a look at you, dear. See what Gully sees in you, shall we?" I suddenly found myself being whisked and twirled around in a circle by Sonia Finnegan, as if I was being examined like a fashion designer inspecting a model for any lumps and bumps that might destroy his designer outfit. It was humiliating, to say the least, as Sonia eyeballed me. Her dark hawk-like eyes seemed to bore into me. They were cold and mean. I got the profound sense she was enjoying my obvious discomfort, for I was certain I'd seen a condescending smirk on her face. I was conscious I wasn't looking my best, of course, and was regretting profusely that I was not wearing something more to Mrs. Finnegan's more refined taste. She ran her keen eyes over me, and then said, "Goodness gracious, girl, where did you get those dreadful jeans from? They look as if they come from a thrift store. You do realise they've got tears all over the knee area." "Mum," said Gully, interjecting to save my humiliation, "those jeans are a big fashion trend at the moment for young women like my wife. All the women are wearing them now, I'll have you know, in my age group and younger. Goodness gracious me! Who would ever buy jeans with holes in them, I ask you? They wouldn't even last a couple of cycles in the washing machine, I'm most sure. If you don't mind my saying, Sandra, woman to woman, shall I say, they do nothing for your figure. Your legs are a little on the chunky side, aren't they? If you tend to have thicker legs, well, jeans like that are not good for you, because they only accentuate how large your legs are. You need something that is going to give you a slimmer impression. I can see I'm going to need to show you a few fashion tricks. Take you shopping, perhaps. I wouldn't like to introduce you to my friends looking like you do now. I do understand, dear, that you're from a small town in Vermont. No wonder you know so little about the fashion world. Never mind, that can be corrected. I can teach you a great deal. I can show you how to look very elegant. A nip and tuck here, and you'll look $1 million, I'm most sure. Mum, for goodness sake, stop being so rude. There's nothing wrong with Sandra's figure. Or the jeans she's wearing, for that matter. I was only offering Sandra a few invaluable pointers, which most women would appreciate, I'll have you know, Gully. I don't believe in lying through my teeth and telling someone they look great when they so obviously don't. I'm sure Sandra appreciates my honesty. I'm not sure your kind of directness is appreciated, Mum. You can be thorny at the very best of times. Look at us, we're all standing here in the doorway, and you haven't even come into the house. Please come in, Sandra, said Sonia Finnegan, showing the way, and casting me an insincere smile. I guess I didn't know what to expect in my mother-in-law, but it was so typical of my husband Gully not to tell me a thing about her, to prepare me for our first introduction. I did listen into her phone call, of course, but seeing her in the flesh was an altogether different scenario. I had imagined a woman of my mother's generation, with a slightly weathered complexion, who wore her advancing years with both grace and dignity, the endearing lines on her face accentuating the full life she had so far lived and was living. But Sonia Finnegan didn't look like a woman that had any intention of aging gracefully. She would literally put roadblocks on her skin, I'm most sure, to prevent the formation of any wrinkles. Yes, I hate to admit it, Sonia Finnegan was pretty close to perfect. She was in excellent shape for a woman of her age, in the menopause, but I was to learn that she attended Kalanetics classes 3 times a week. She took regular brisk walks on the beach, but she didn't have an extra pound of supercilious body weight. and watched everything she ate like a hawk. I noticed she was wearing a smart pair of pleated cropped white pants, with a beautiful white long-sleeved t-shirt, with a blue rim around the edges, and blue buttons below the collar, placed at a sophisticated slant. Her clothes were elegant and definitely designer, and on her pretty well-manicured feet, her toenails had been painted a glossy pink colour. She was wearing a very elegant pair of stylish-looking sandals. It was hardly surprising that I felt like a dung beetle, being introduced to the most fabulously beautiful butterfly. All I wanted to do was to scuttle away into a corner and make myself scarce. Why had Gully not warned me that his mother looked like a model, with her perfect petite figure, Hollywood smile, and a golden complexion that was smooth? It hadn't been acquainted with a wrinkle in its entire life. I knew this was because Sonia Finnegan probably pumped herself up with so much Botox. It would probably have been enough to kill a rhino. And it was a miracle it hadn't killed her in the process. But much like an Egyptian mummy, Sonia was determined to preserve her beauty for infinity. I knew absolutely that had I known how punctilious Sonia Finnegan actually was, I wouldn't have dared arrive at her house looking like I was the plumber that was there to fix a blockage in the bathroom. It was humiliating to be judged by this woman on my appearance. But during the course of those 3 days spent with my in-laws, I had felt like an insect in a glass jar, being watched all the time by Sonia, like a laboratory experiment that was being studied at great length. I don't think I ever felt more relieved than the day we said goodbye to the Finnegans and returned home to our New York apartment. But now we were coming back to the Finnegans' house all over again, on the Oregon coast, and we were going to be staying with them for 3 weeks. I couldn't help but wonder what I'd got myself into this time, and whether Sonia Finnegan would make me feel as unwelcome as she had done last time. Gully seemed very sure that things would be very different for me this time, as he'd spoken at great length to his mother on my account, and pointed out that she had not treated me with any respect on our last visit. I told my mother, when we stayed with them on our last visit, that she'd been most unwelcoming to you, extremely rude, and made you feel very uncomfortable. I told her I didn't appreciate her comparing you to Lydia all the time, and that she needed to respect the fact that you are my wife, and that I'm with you now. You told her that? I'd asked in surprise, happy that Gully had told his mother how unwelcome I'd felt in their home on our last visit, after we'd soon got married. This was music to my ears. Sonia Finnegan needed to understand that me and Gully were a couple now, and she couldn't continue to nurse wild ideas of reuniting him with his ex-wife. That ship had long since sailed, and she needed to get her head around that, whether she liked it or not. Of course I wanted Sonia to like me, but the truth was I knew we had little in common. I was a small-town girl from Vermont, who had made some big mistakes in my young life. I was not as sophisticated, avant-garde, or as cosmopolitan as Sonia Finnegan so obviously was. I do believe that my humble small-town roots and lack of worldliness were things about me that Sonia Finnegan found so off-putting in every sense of the word. I was in no doubt that Sonia Finnegan viewed me as being somewhat backward, for I had never moved around in her affluent circles in New York. But I told myself that on this trip to the coast, if Sonia Finnegan treated me with disdain, I would ignore her, and if she took a nasty jab at me, with a few unkind words, like she'd done, about the rips in my jeans and the size of my legs, I wasn't going to let it get me down in any way. The truth was underneath all this confident swagger that I was arming myself with before I arrived at the Finnegans again. I knew underneath the bravado I wasn't actually very confident at all, and the truth was I was dreading the next 3 weeks, more than I've dreaded anything else in my entire life. But I had not expressed the extent of my misgivings to Gully, because I didn't want to drive a wedge between him and his mother. I really wanted to make this visit to the coast work. "We're nearly there, sweetheart," Gully said to me, reaching out to squeeze my hand reassuringly. "You're not nervous, are you, love? My mother's not going to eat you." "I beg to differ," I said, raising a cynical brow. "Look at me. My linen pants are all crumpled. If your mother sees me looking this dishevelled, what is she going to think?" "I don't care what my mother thinks, love. We've been on a long road trip, and thanks to me you've had no air conditioning during the whole journey. We're both like a couple of sweaty sardines that have been cooped up in a tin can. We've been on the road for 4 days, for goodness sake, with overnight stops. So of course we're not going to look our best. We're going to be a little unkempt, with greasy hair and sweaty skin. Big deal. If my mother doesn't like the way you look after our trip, it's her problem. We're not going to stand on ceremony. We're here on a 3-week vacation to enjoy ourselves. And what do you do on a holiday? You let your hair down. You have a good time.
Of course I agree with all that, and that we shouldn't stand on ceremony. I'm the first to say we should always be dressed comfortably. But you know what your mother's like. She always looks as if she stepped off the runway at a modelling show, or off the red carpet.
My mother's always been like that. She's a meticulous dresser, but don't let that intimidate you. As I keep saying, we're here to enjoy ourselves, to have a very good time, and I for one intend to do just that. We're going to have a lot of fun here, let me tell you. My parents live in a very beautiful spot on the Oregon coast that is wild and untamed, with only a few locals in the immediate area. So we can go exploring to our heart's content.
Let's just say Gully's words to his mother must have done some good. For when we arrived at the Finnegans' gorgeous state-of-the-art beachfront home that overlooked the magnificent blue ocean, I was pleasantly surprised that Sonia Finnegan treated me with a little more respect than on our first meeting. Maybe there was some humanity in her after all, or maybe she just wanted to preserve her relationship with Gully, and was afraid of rubbing him up the wrong way by offending me. To my amazement, she put an arm around me to give me a hug, something she'd never done before. Maybe the tide was actually changing, and Sonia Finnegan was beginning to realize that I was her new daughter-in-law, and that I wasn't going to be going away in a hurry, so she might as well make a friend out of me, rather than a foe, even if I wasn't her beloved Lydia.
"So how was your trip, my dear?"
she asked me, looking me straight in the eyes, with what seemed like genuine concern.
"You do look awfully tired, if you don't mind my saying so. But then again, 4 days on the road, that must have been frightful for you. It's so much better to fly, let me tell you. Being on the road for 4 days, that's far too much."
I agree with you. Flying would have been so much better. I keep telling Gully that. The trip was exhausting. Unfortunately, Gully refused to have the air conditioning on. So we've both been sweating like pigs. So you must mind my appearance, Mrs. Finnegan.
"Oh, call me Sonia, dear. Well, you look incredibly good for someone who's been stuck in a car for 4 days without any air conditioning. Is this true, Gulliver? You refused your Sandra any air conditioning on that trip down. How could you be so unchivalrous? Don't tell me this is in order to cut down on costs. You are the end, love. Just like your father, you're always keen to save a penny whenever you can. Mum, it's got nothing to do with saving a penny. It was because I loathe air conditioning. It brings on a cold for me. It makes me feel very sick. Well, I'm appalled, Gully. Absolutely appalled. How can you do this to your wife? Be so inconsiderate like this. The journey must have been absolutely insufferable for her. I think, Sandra, you should go upstairs and have a shower at once, and I will prepare some ice-cold lemonade for the both of you. You look like you both could do with it."
I was stunned by how kind Sonia Finnegan was being towards me, and I wondered if my trip to the Oregon coast would not be so bad after all. But over dinner that night, the unthinkable happened. Sonia Finnegan announced we had a guest joining us for dinner, who'd be staying at their beachfront home for a few days with us. I didn't think much of this announcement, until Sonia Finnegan got up from the table very gracefully and excused herself.
"That will be our guest,"
she said, wiping her mouth with a starched napkin, and rising to her feet. She straightened out the elegant shirt she was wearing.
"Please continue eating without me, will you? I've already finished anyway. I won't be a moment. I'll get our guest settled in nicely into the spare room upstairs, and then she can come down and join us for dessert."
I could hear a murmur of voices in the background, and the trill of Sonia Finnegan's cheery laughter, as she was helping the guest up the stairs with her suitcase. Gully had told me it wasn't uncommon for some of his mother's friends from New York to stay at their beachfront home for a few days, so I assumed this was another one of his mother's friends. I could hear her telling her friend how delighted she was to see her again, and how long it had been. Connor Finnegan was telling us about a recent fishing trip he'd been on, when Sonia Finnegan walked through the door, with a beautiful young woman at her side. I remember both Connor and Gully's eyes just widened in astonishment as they observed the young woman, as if she was the very last person that they had expected to see in their living room. I heard Gully swear under his breath and say, "I don't believe this. What the bloody hell?" "Lydia," said Sonia, looking directly at the woman and then at me from across the table, with an almost triumphant expression on her face. "I'd like to introduce you to Gully's new wife. This is Sandra." "Hello," said Lydia shyly. "Nice to meet you, Sandra." She reticently walked over to me and extended her long, slim hand towards mine. I took her hand, shaking it quickly, my whole body in a spin, as I wondered what my husband's ex-wife was doing here. This was Lydia. Had Sandra invited her here over the weekend to upstage me, I wondered? Did she want Gully to see how much better Lydia was for him than I was? Was this an artful, scheming plan of hers, to try and persuade her son, to give Lydia a second chance? But she had forgotten something. Me and Gully were married, and Gully had made it absolutely clear that his feelings towards Lydia were not of the romantic kind, for he had seen in her a treachery he had despised, and he didn't have much time for her any more. Gully's face had reddened. He rose very quickly to his feet, pushing the chair aside and glaring at his mother. And then his attention was directed towards Lydia. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, looking at her with furious, wide, questioning eyes that appeared both confused and perplexed at the very same time. Then he turned around abruptly to address his mother. "Is this some kind of a sick joke, Mum? Because if it is, I'm not laughing. What the hell is Lydia doing here? Why did you invite her over to the house when you knew that me and Sandra were coming to stay here? What the hell is wrong with you, Mum? If this is one of your clever stunts to bring Lydia and me together, keep dreaming, because I'm sorry. Sorry to burst your bubble, Mum, but we're never getting together again, and that will never happen. I have Sandra now, and I'm a happily married man. So whatever this is about, I'm not playing your game." "But of course you are, love. I never said anything, did I, to say that you weren't? But Lydia is family, more so than ever. And I would like you to be gracious to our guest, Gully, because whether you like it or not, Lydia is going to play a very big part in our lives from now on. Lydia has something very important to tell you, Gully, and I thought now would be a good time as any to get it off her chest, while everybody is gathered around the table to hear her out. And I'd appreciate it if you would listen to her, before jumping to any wild conclusions." "What could Lydia possibly have to tell me?" said Gully, now looking irate. "Mum, I can't believe you did this. I can't get over it. What on earth is wrong with you? How many times have I got to tell you that Lydia and I are over, we're over, before the message actually sinks into that thick skull of yours?" "Look, Gully, don't get irate. You're overreacting as usual. I think you need to be very nice and accommodating to our guest, and stop being so offensive. You have got to listen to what Lydia has to tell you. It's very important." Lydia was silent for a brief moment, almost as if the cat had got her tongue. And then she spoke, her attention directed fiercely on Gully. "I know you're not happy to see me, Gully." "Happy? Of course I'm not happy. Why the hell would you accept my mother's invitation to the coast? You know what my mother's like. I assume you know I'm a married man. Or has that fact conveniently slipped your mind?" "Oh, don't be mad at me, Gully. Of course I know you're married. I'm well informed, you know. Your mother told me that on the phone. I'm not here to dredge up the past, if that's what you think." "You could have fooled me," said Gully, snorting. His head was still shaking furiously, as he glared defiantly at his ex-wife. "Look, Gully, I just wanted to say for the record, I'm very sorry for what I did back then, when I cheated on you. I did it to get revenge on you, because you refused to refurbish the kitchen. I know it was pathetic, really pathetic. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. It was an immature, insane thing for me to do. But to be fair, I was drunk at the time, and I got carried away with your best friend. But had I been sober, I'd have never gone off with him in the way I did. Just so you know, Gully, you're the only man I've ever loved. I'd never willingly cheat on you.
I don't care, Liddy, if you were drunk or not, when you went off with my best friend. There is no excuse for what you did. You crossed the line and you know it.
I know I did, Gully. I was an absolute idiot. Just so you know, I've grown up a lot since then. I never knew my foolish, deranged actions would lead to our breakup. I made a catastrophic mistake. One I deeply regret. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Gully, and I threw our relationship away. But we can move on past this and at least be civilized to each other. It's water under the bridge now, surely. I'd like it very much if we could be friends. It would make things so much easier between the two of us.
I think you should get your things, Lydia, and leave at once. Honestly, I don't know why you're entertaining the idea that we should still be friends together. I think that ship has long since sailed, don't you? I wish you well, Lydia, I really do. And if you have regrets for what happened back then, well, I appreciate the fact that you apologized. But we all make mistakes. But I've moved on with my life, and you would do well to do the same. As I said, I accept your apology, but you've already told me that you're sorry, and I've accepted it. So why are we harping over this again? I thought we agreed at the time to go our separate ways, and as I said, put the past behind us. So I can't for the life of me understand what you're doing here. Did my mother put you up to this? I rather suspect she did. Did she give you the false impression that the old flame between us could easily be rekindled? Because I assure you it cannot. I cannot say it plainer than that.
I've put the past behind me, Gully. Of course I have, said Lydia insistently. I'm here for very different reasons, I'll have you know.
Honestly, Gully,
said Sonia Finnegan, interjecting herself into the conversation.
You can see Lydia over here is very upset with what happened between the two of you. She apologized, did she not? I think it's very unkind of you to disregard her as a good friend. Just because she messed up, Gully. You're the one that needs to be grown up about this, instead of acting like a wounded animal, trying to fend off a predator. I've been great friends with Lydia for many years, and I invited her here for good reason. The least you can do is to be civil towards her, and make her feel welcome in our home, instead of looking at her so contemptuously, with dagger-like eyes.
I had been sitting there staring at Lydia in disbelief, my hand still reasonably warm from shaking her hand. I was stunned to see how magnificently beautiful she was. Gulliver had never told me she was such a head-turner. Everything about her was as close to perfect as you could get, from her long, dark brown, heavily highlighted hair, along with her beguiling greenish-brown eyes, fringed by thick, black, luscious lashes, which I was sure were not fake. Lydia was both elegant and sophisticated, in the same way that Sonia Finnegan was. They were like two birds of a feather. Lydia's presence in the dining room was making me feel completely frumpy, in the scruffy pair of Bermuda shorts I was wearing. I was beginning to feel self-conscious about the extra doughy weight around my middle, which suddenly made me feel so enormous as I compared myself to this extremely slender woman. I could see exactly why Sonia Finnegan liked Lydia so much. I could see them hanging around in the same social circles together, mixing with people from affluent backgrounds, drinking lattes in coffee shops, and thoroughly enjoying shopping together in designer boutiques. I remember hearing Sonia Finnegan telling her husband that I was like a cart horse compared to Lydia, who was a thoroughbred. And in that moment I certainly felt like a cart horse, big, clumsy and ungainly, whereas Lydia was like a ballerina, light, ethereal, and so incredibly graceful. My eyes skimmed over Lydia, like someone desperate to find some fault in the perfection that was standing before me, so that I could feel marginally better about myself. But honestly, everything about Lydia was annoyingly perfect, from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. It was as if Lydia had come out of one of those moulds, with nothing remotely out of place. It did give me pause for thought, to wonder what Gully saw in me, with all my imperfections blazingly on display. Lydia was wearing an elegant pair of navy blue crop pants, with a white t-shirt, and an elegant necklace around her neck, which included some real pearls. Her outfit was simplistic and stylish, making me feel that my frumpy Bermuda shorts needed to be discarded at once, at the earliest opportunity and never get to see the light of day ever again. In fact, my entire wardrobe needed a very critical overhaul.
I'm not being unreasonable, Mum. I resent your saying that, said Gully. You're to blame for all of this, Mum, I hope you realise. You seem to really enjoy setting the cat among the pigeons, don't you? And causing an immeasurable amount of drama wherever you go. If your life is so dreary and dull at the coast, why don't you audition for a part in some seedy soap opera on television? Because at least the drama can be contained on the show, and not burgeon out into our everyday lives like a rampant overgrown vine. I'm not trying to invite drama, Gully. You know I love living here by the coast. I have a very full and contented life, thank you very much, and plenty of friends. I don't need to be dramatic, and I resent the implication that you say that I am being dramatic. You could have fooled me, Mum. If that's the case, will you kindly tell me why you invited Lydia to stay here, when you knew full well I was bringing Sandra with me? To stay at the coast. What you've done is not right, Mum, and you know it. If you think that Lydia and I are going to get back together, as I keep reiterating to you over and over again, I'm sorry, but it's not going to happen. I know how your mind works, Mum, and how deviously underhanded you can sometimes be in your determination to get your way. I love Sandra. There's nothing you can do or say to change my mind about her. You have the audacity to call Lydia family, after what she did to me. Whose side are you actually on, Mum? That's what I'd like to know. I'm not taking anybody's side, Gulliver, but I'm afraid Lydia is family, so the sooner we can get our heads around that, the better. You need to get on better with Lydia, because you're going to see a lot more of her, whether you like it or not. So the very least you can do is try and get along. Lydia's told you, Gulliver, that she's sorry for some of the mistakes she's made in the past, and it would be very gracious of you to forgive her. What on earth has got into you, Mum? Didn't you hear what I told her? I've already forgiven her. Are you tone deaf or something?
Gully turned around to address his father, exasperation written all over his face. In his silent body language, his message was unambiguously clear. He was clandestinely begging his father to intercede on his behalf, to make his doggedly stubborn, unreasonable mother see sense.
Tell her, Dad. Tell Mum she's out of line, bringing Lydia here to stay with us. Did you even know about this, Dad? Did you know Mum had invited Lydia here?
Connor Finnegan shook his head.
I knew nothing about this, Gully. Nothing about this at all. If I had known what your sneaky mother was up to, you know me, I'd have discouraged her from inviting Lydia around here. I'm sorry, Lydia, said Mr. Finnegan, turning to direct his attention on his ex-daughter-in-law. I know Sonia is very fond of you, and you're a good friend of hers. But I don't think it's appropriate you're staying with us while Gully and Sandra are around. It makes things rather awkward. You are, of course, welcome to come and stay here with me and my wife, when my son and his wife Sandra are not staying with us at the same time. I can't say it fairer than that. I'm with my son on this one, I'm afraid.
I came here precisely, Mr. Finnegan, because Gully is here with his new wife Sandra. It's important we all get on. That's the whole idea of this rendezvous, don't you see?
Tell them, Lydia. Now is a good time as any, said Sonia encouragingly. As I was saying to you, Gully, before you rudely interrupted me with all your protests, is that Lydia is here for very good reason. And it's not to cause chaos or mayhem with your relationship with Sandra. So for goodness sake, keep your hair on, son. The only drama that's unfolding around the dinner table is the drama you're creating, Gully. Why don't you sit down, and I will bring everyone a piece of apple pie, just out of the oven, shall I? And then you can listen to what Lydia has to say. And then you will completely understand why she came to stay here for a few days.
I watched Lydia making herself comfortable at the table. Gully had reached my hand under the table to grab it. He gave it an encouraging squeeze. He then whispered in my ear, I'm so sorry, Sandra. I don't know what the hell has got into my mother. Sonia Finnegan had placed delicious slices of piping hot apple pie that had just come out of the oven in front of us. She also passed around the clotted cream. But everyone had lost their appetite. Nobody appeared to be remotely interested in dessert. It smelt so good, of course, and I had been dreaming of that apple pie. But now that I felt like a blob or a big beached whale when I compared myself to Lydia, the idea of eating any of that apple pie made me imagine myself growing 5 times larger. All eyes around the dinner table were fixed on Lydia, and apart from Sonia Finnegan, I think we were all thinking, what the hell is this woman doing here? Little did I know, of course, that the answer would soon be forthcoming, and in a moment it would feel like someone had thrown a piece of very sharp shrapnel at my life. Lydia straightened her back up in the chair, as if she was bracing herself for what she was about to tell us. Her right hand was playing rather awkwardly with the fork on her plate, next to the apple pie, that I was sure she was never going to eat. Lydia was a woman who, I was absolutely certain, religiously drank green smoothies for breakfast every morning, and religiously ate poached salmon and seared asparagus for dinner every night. I was certain no sugar had dared to touch her lips for years on end. Sonia pulled out a chair around the table and sat down next to Lydia. I noticed her lips were twitching rather too much, almost as if she was trying to hold back a gloating smile that was about to erupt on her face. I rather suspected she was thoroughly enjoying causing me a sense of great disquiet. I was in no doubt she wanted me to feel that Lydia was a great threat to my marriage. And in that delusional self-punishing moment, when my self-esteem was the size of an ant, I really began to feel the impending, dreaded possibility that Lydia was here to tear my marriage to Gully apart. I was sure that was the reason she'd come. "Go on, Lydia, tell everybody the truth, will you?" said Sonia Finnegan, her eyes lingering over me for rather too long. "Gully's going to have to know about this sooner or later, so it might as well be now. Out with it, girl. You can do it." "Know about what?" asked Gully. "If you've got something to say, Lydia, why don't you just come out with it? I'm listening." Lydia looked awkward for a brief moment, and then she said, "We have a little girl, Gully. She's 1 year old, to be exact. Her name is Meredith, and I think she deserves to get to know her father, don't you? You will love her, Gully. She is so cute as a button. She's the splitting image of you, I have to say." Gully's eyes widened. His jaw dropped wide open, while I stared at Lydia in confoundment, wondering if I'd actually heard right. Was she really telling Gully that he was the father of her 1-year-old girl? This had to be some kind of sick joke, surely, for neither me or Gully had got any inkling that Lydia, his ex-wife, had ever been pregnant when they got divorced. But then, after Lydia had cheated on him, he'd never seen her again because she'd moved away to another state. Was this Lydia's insidious way to try and get Gully back into her own life, in some deviously underhanded plan of hers? If this was a game, it wasn't going to end well. If she was here to announce that she and Gully had a child, then it had to be true, surely. No one would willingly make something like that up, would they? "You have a baby girl, and you claim she's mine," said Gully, looking astounded. "Why do I find that hard to believe, Lydia? You made no mention that you were pregnant when we got divorced, and now you're here claiming I'm a father to a 1-year-old girl that I know absolutely nothing about. Excuse me if I'm a bit dubious." "Well, to be fair, Gulliver," said Sonia Finnegan, interjecting into the conversation and taking over like she normally did, "Lydia didn't know at the time she was pregnant. She didn't know for many months. And you didn't see her for a long time. None of us did. Besides all that, she's always been extremely trim, so she had no way of knowing she was pregnant until much later on in her pregnancy. She contacted me recently to ask for some of your DNA, and then I sent her off an old toothbrush of yours. The DNA turned out to be a perfect match to yours, Gully. You're a father. Isn't that wonderful news, Gully? Me and your father are grandparents now. I couldn't be prouder. I, for one, am looking very forward to getting to know my little granddaughter." "Is this some kind of a joke? You didn't think to tell me any of this, Lydia?" said Gully, sounding furious. "Why did you not contact me sooner? I would have quite liked to know if I was a father, don't you think?" "Well, at the time I was heartbroken. You had ditched me, Gully. I moved away from you to a different state, didn't I?" And when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to involve you. I knew I could raise Meredith as a single mother. But over the last year, I've been thinking about it an awful lot. And I thought it would be such a shame if Meredith didn't get to know her real dad. I mean, every little girl deserves to know her father, don't you think? You're a good man, Gully, you really are. And I don't want to deprive my daughter of a relationship with you. It was your mother's idea to invite me over here for a few days, because we all need to learn to get on, don't we? I'm sure you would want to be very much involved in Meredith's life, and that means you're always going to have contact with me in some way, whether you like it or not, Gully.
So where is this daughter of mine, then?
She's not here, Gully. I wouldn't bring her here while we're discussing all this. I've left her in my parents' charge. I accepted your mother's kind invitation for a few days at the coast to discuss this matter with you, your wife, and with your mum and dad, to work out a way in which you can have access to Meredith. She's a lovely little girl, and she is so like you, Gully, in every regard. You're going to adore her. At this point, I couldn't take this conversation any longer. I felt like a balloon that had just been popped, as if all the oxygen had been vanquished from my system. I knew exactly why Sonia Finnegan had invited Lydia over to the house, and was so keen to announce that Gulliver was now her father. It was her duplicitous, artful way of trying to bring Lydia and Gully back together again. In that quintessential moment, I began to seriously doubt my relationship with Gully, as to whether it had the strength to overcome a hurdle like this. I could feel the nausea rising up in the back of my throat, and I felt absolutely certain I was going to be violently sick. So I quickly excused myself from the dinner table. Not that anyone appeared to notice, for all eyes were steadily fixed on Lydia, who had stolen everybody's undivided focus, and Gully, who was so astonished by Lydia's news, appeared to be locked under some kind of bewildered trance. I hastily made a dash to my bedroom upstairs, where in the bathroom en suite I began to hurl up the contents of my stomach rather violently. I was sweating profusely, as beads of unbridled moisture droplets dappled my forehead, almost as if I had been hit with a heavy fever. The bitter taste of gall clung to the back of my throat, with my heart pounding rather violently in my chest, and every single cell in my body standing up to attention. I opened the sliding doors from the bedroom that led out onto the balcony. I was desperate to get into the cool air of the night, as if it was a warm friend that would eagerly embrace me, who could offer me the assurances that no one in the dining room could. I took big gulps of the cool, briny air, staring out at the night sky with a sense of awe and wonderment, allowing the silvery stars in the firmament to blast away some of my troubles. I didn't want to think about Lydia's horrifying revelations around the dinner table that evening. I noticed on the far side of the balcony there was a fire escape that I'd never observed before, with a narrow pencil-thin spiral of stairs that led down to the downstairs patio. In that quintessential moment, I was overcome with an urgent need to take a walk on the beach. The brisk exercise would do me the world of good, I thought. I glanced down briefly at my watch and was astonished to see it was 11 o'clock. We had started the evening meal rather late, but I couldn't believe it was an hour away from midnight. I didn't care that it was so dark. I didn't care that I was not acquainted with the beach or the tidal times. I didn't care that I didn't like the dark. I needed an escape, and a quick one at that. All I knew right now is I couldn't stay in the house for a moment or second longer. I felt suffocated. Lydia's presence in the Finnegan household had sucked out the oxygen from my lungs, squeezing them completely dry. For what she had revealed around the dinner table about my husband being the father of her 1-year-old daughter was too much for me to get my head around. The waves of nausea were relentless, I'm afraid, and were cruelly clinging to the back of my throat, refusing to abate. So I was gagging for some fresh air. In truth, I could not escape the beachfront house fast enough. I wanted to get away from Gully, from my in-laws, and from Lydia herself. All of a sudden I felt like the one that didn't belong in the Finnegan household, as if Lydia herself was pushing me away from my husband Gully, with this announcement that was to change the whole course of our lives, I was most sure. And what if Gully was to decide that he should rekindle the flame with Lydia again, as after all, he was a father to her child, and he'd want to be very much involved in his daughter's life. This was all such a dreadful mess, and I felt all the more hurt by the triumphant look I'd seen on Sonia Finnegan's face when she had announced that Lydia was family and would always be a part of our lives. That woman would have done anything to get Lydia and Gully back together again. She'd probably be absolutely delighted if Gully and I were to get divorced. She would likely persuade him to do the right thing by Lydia, by throwing me to the curbside, and remarry his ex-wife. I'm embarrassed to say I was tormented by so many doubts, which undermined the great relationship I had with Gully. It was true that Gully professed to me that I was the love of his life, but now our love would surely be tested with the bomb that had just been released in our lives, like an unwanted curveball. Tears were stinging my eyes, my nose was running, and I was a sorry sight indeed. My fear of the dark was overridden by the desperate need to get away. Almost as if running from the Finnegan household fast and hard would be running away from everything that had just happened around the dinner table that evening. While I was on the beach, at the very least I could pretend to myself that none of this had happened. I grabbed a torch and immediately darted down the iron staircase of the fire escape. I ran down a footpath to the beach. I glanced briefly back at the Finnegan house, and I could see the silhouettes of Mr. and Mrs. Finnegan and Lydia seated around the dinner table. I could see Gully was standing upright, pacing up and down the dining room, with his hands running through his hair, which meant he was quite stressed about what had just transpired. I guess it's not every day you learn out of the blue that you've become a father. I didn't want to think how Lydia's little 1-year-old girl would ultimately impact our lives. Gully and I wanted to have children of our own one day, and he now already had a child with another woman, and knowing this was gut-wrenching and soul-destroying for me, to say the very least. The more I thought about this, the more violently ill I suddenly became. I couldn't believe that this was actually happening to me. I threw off my sandals when I reached the end of the footpath, so that my bare feet were greeted to the cool feel of the beach sand on my toes, and the sensation was both soothing and comforting. I had done field and track as a schoolgirl, and been very good at it too, but over the years my athletic prowess had significantly dwindled, especially with the doughy weight gain around my middle. It was so dark on the beach, but my torch lit up the path ahead of me. I could hear the ocean waves crashing against the shore, and feel a soft breeze nuzzling my cheeks, almost as if the breeze was reassuring me that all was well. I wish I could believe that. As I ran, the exercise helped me let go of my thoughts like releasing a balloon on the wind. I ran and ran down the beach, and it went on forever. It would seem as if there was no end in sight, but I didn't care. I could run forever and never stop, for the adrenaline pulsing through my veins was not brought on by fear, but by the recent happenings over the course of the evening. My energy seemed to be turbocharged. I failed to realize how breathless I'd become, for my physical comfort was the least of my concerns right now. I could see there were many crabs on the beach, scurrying all over the wet sand. Some of them were impressively large, and all over the beach were washed up pieces of seaweed from the recent tide. All of a sudden I felt a very big spasm go through me, and then it got too much, as I became lightheaded and extremely dizzy. I'm not exactly sure what happened to me, but I suddenly fainted and collapsed on the beach. I remember 1 minute I was running, and the next I wasn't. I was lying on the beach. The cooling water from the ocean waves was pooling around my body. I could feel its icy fingers seeping through my clothes. Even though I was in a state of semi-consciousness, I was fully aware of the physical sensations that were occurring around me in an abstract, dreamlike way. The next thing I knew, I was being dragged across the beach sand, away from the water to a drier spot, I suspect. Someone was leaning over me and slapping me urgently on the face. I kept hearing the words, "Joey! Joey! Joey!" or something like that. I know when most people have a fainting spell, shortly afterwards they wake up, but I'm not sure what had happened to me, and why I was aware of what was going on in a disconnected way. Looking back, I still don't know much about my unorthodox blackout or why it occurred, but I think it was longer than just for a few minutes. Even though I was well aware of someone attending to me on the beach, whoever they were, they made me feel safe and protected, as if I was being nursed in my mother's own bosom. Whoever they were crouching over me, they kept slapping my face and saying, "Kyoki! Kyoki!" something like that. I tried to open my eyes, but it was so delicious keeping them closed. I felt so safe and content. I was sure I was in my bed, dreaming all this, that I was on a beach and someone was trying to rouse me from my sleep, that I just wanted to continue sleeping and remain in this blissfully disconnected and semi-conscious state. I was annoyed with this person, whoever they were, trying to get my attention. So a stubbornness overcame me as I continued to sleep. "Kauki! Kauki!" said the voice insistently, slapping me on the cheeks again. Slowly but surely I reluctantly opened my eyes, and then I saw a large figure squatting over me. I realized that someone was staring down at me through honey-coloured eyes that were expressing grave concern. I was staring into the human-like face of a female Bigfoot, who was towering over me, as if I was all but a tiny, very fragile china doll. I'd felt so terribly big around Lydia, so it was good to suddenly feel so small. My eyes began to bulge from their sockets, my jaw dropping to the ground, as I wondered if I was really dreaming. It had to be a dream, surely. This Bigfoot could not be real. Or could she? My torch was lying on the ground, a few feet away from me. It must have dropped out of my hands when the Bigfoot had dragged me away from the wet sand. But it was positioned in such an angle that the light seemed to spill generously over the Bigfoot's face, so I could see her clearly. She looked so relieved that I'd opened my eyes. "Are you real?" I asked her, thinking no, this was definitely a dream. And then in my head I telepathically heard an answer. "Of course I'm real. What happened? Are you all right? I found you collapsed on the beach. I was very concerned about you, for your state was not a good one." I stared up at the Bigfoot in amazement and managed the words, "Did you just talk to me? Or was that my imagination?" "Of course I talked to you," I heard in my head again. "Would you like me to help you to your feet? You look like you've lost all your strength. You're very upset about something. A blue haze is swirling around you furiously. It's a vicious haze. Haven't seen a blue haze like that since my mother miscarried a few years ago. She was in a bad place back then." "A blue haze?" I asked. I did not ask this out loud. I asked this in my head. "Sorry, what is a blue haze?" The answer arrived in my head almost immediately. "A blue haze is an energy signature. It's of despair, grief, disappointment, and confusion. You are wearing that on your person right now. Yours is a vicious one. It sucked the very life out of your soul. No wonder you collapsed," said the Bigfoot. She continued, "The blue haze can be very overwhelming, especially when you've had a nasty shock of some kind. I've known many of my kind to pass out when they're wearing a blue haze. It's a powerful energy, an indomitable energy that can drain your reserves fast. But luckily it's very uncommon. It's only brought on by extreme stress." "You know all about me, by looking at me?" I asked, confounded. "What you say is absolutely true. I've had a big shock this evening. I believe it might destroy my life. That's why I came out onto the beach to get some fresh air. I ran and ran, hoping I could run away from my troubles, but fat lot of good that did me. How can you tell I'm going through this?" The Bigfoot answered me again. "I read energy signatures, like I read the weather patterns in the sky, so I know whether it's going to be a good day or a bad one, whether it's going to rain or whether the sun is going to shine. Even when I kill an animal to eat, I always check the energy signature. It has to be absolutely right. I need to know that the animal has lived a good life and is healthy. I do it with plants as well. I would never ever hunt an animal with a blue energy signature, because that would mean the animal was heavily diseased, highly stressed, in a bad place. And eating food like that can damage your own energy signature. Everything is energy around you, so you have to be careful what you consume. There are sick plants that give off a blue energy light, and you don't eat those. They'll make you very, very sick. Everything around us is energy, but a blue haze means the animal or plant is under considerable stress. You see that large crab over there? I bet you think it's healthy. I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. That crab is very sick. He'll be dead in 24 hours. He's got a blue signature. Will this blue energy signature you say that is surrounding me, will it go away? I asked. Of course it will go away. Yours is temporary, you see. A lot of blue energy signatures aren't. If it's on an animal indefinitely, and on a plant, well, they're guaranteed to die within 24 hours. But yours is just passing through. It won't last for very long. So you don't need to worry about it. In the morning your energy signature will be a rosy one. You're saying my troubles will go away? I asked. Absolutely. In the morning you will be fine. Your energy signature will be pink. Now let me help you to your feet and see if you're strong enough to go back home. Your house is that white building on the beach, I assume. I don't see any other house around for miles, so I imagine that must be where you're staying. That's right, I said to the Bigfoot, who lifted me up with one of her powerful overlong arms and watched me take a few steps. She walked by my side down the beach, and once we reached the Finnegan property, she tapped me on the back very gently. You'll be fine, she told me telepathically. Don't let the blue haze drag you down. It's going away. It's passing through. She then nodded and glided away, and in that moment I realized I hadn't thanked her for her extreme kindness. I made my way back up the fire escape into my bedroom, and when I saw Gully was not around, in a desperate need of his reassurance, I quickly tiptoed down the landing and down the large staircase, making my way to the living room. It was the only room with the light left on. I was thinking that I would find Gully there, but before I got to the living room, I heard Sonia Finnegan say, "Well, Gully's gone to the beach looking for that annoying wife of his. Honestly, what he sees in that dull, nondescript, dreary woman, I honestly don't know. She's wandered off, I guess, rather aimlessly. She must have been upset to hear our announcement over the dinner table. Thankfully, my husband's gone to bed, so we can have a nice little chinwag before Gully and his wife get back." "Do you really think we can pull this off, Sonia? Why do I feel so doubtful?" said Lydia. "I mean, what if Gully finds out the baby isn't his? What if he doesn't believe the fake DNA results that I present him with, and he does his own DNA test? Then he'll find out I've been lying to him all along." "He need never find out, love. This is strictly between the two of us. He thinks I've seen the DNA report, so he believes the baby is his. I want the two of you back together again where you belong. I'm sure now he believes he has a baby girl with you. That wife of his will be given her calling cards pretty soon, which is no great tragedy as far as I'm concerned. If you and Gully can be together again, and you are back in our family, where you've always belonged, everything will be fantastic. You saw for yourself that Sandra doesn't fit into our home at all. She's not like us. That girl is a small-town girl with no sophistication whatsoever." "But are you sure, Sonia, that this is actually going to work? Can we really pull the wool over Gully's eyes? He's always been as sharp as a tack. You could see how furious he was with me to see me again. I've got a horrible feeling in my gut that he may be in love with his wife. And if that is the case, then he's never going to want to remarry me, even if I present Meredith as his own. How will he ever commit to me then?" "Oh, don't worry about that at all. He thinks he's in love with Sandra. But I can put a stop to that sooner or later. Make him see sense. I'll sort Gully out. Leave him to me. I'll make him see his responsibilities as a father to you. He needs to divorce that wife of his as soon as possible and remarry you. And I will make sure it happens." "Not if I have a say in the matter," I said, boldly entering the living room and taking both women off guard. "I heard everything you said, Sonia. I think the fact that you're trying to pretend Lydia's baby girl is Gully's is disgusting. I wonder what Gully will have to say about all this." All of a sudden, Gully was at my side. He was flustered from having run across the beach looking for me everywhere, but had returned to the house to see if I had got back home. He had heard me confront his mother and Lydia, and wondered what was going on. "What's going on here?" asked Gully. "What's all this about?" Sonia's face turned white, and Lydia was beginning to tremble. "I don't know how to tell you this, Gully," I said, "but your mother and Lydia have been conspiring against you. They're trying to make you believe that Lydia's baby is yours, and I'm afraid to tell you she's not." "You mean all this stuff and nonsense about me being a father was not true in the first place?" he asked Lydia in bewilderment. "Why would you make something like that up? Surely you know me better than that. I'd have done my own DNA test to assure my child's parentage, because I don't trust you, Lydia, as far as I can throw you." "Well, it's your mother's fault," said Lydia, pointing to Sonia. "It was her idea to tell you that you were the father of my baby. She was hoping you and I, could make a go of things, get back together again. And she thought the baby would do it for us." "Why am I not surprised by this? said Gully, looking at Lydia and then at his mother with disgust. So tell me, Lydia, who is the father of your child? Let me guess, it's my best friend, is it? It is, admitted Lydia. He doesn't even know he has a child with me. I haven't told him. I was raising Meredith as a single mother, you see. Then your mother contacted me. And well... Lydia did not finish her sentence, as Gully interrupted her. I could see his face was jiggling in indignation. His eyes had grown hard and cold. And I realized in that quintessential moment that Gully couldn't stand the very sight of Lydia. You decided to pretend the baby you had was mine, and my mother put you up to this. How could you do that, Lydia? It's treacherous of you. But if you think for a moment I would leave the love of my life to marry you, think again. It would never have happened. I would be as miserable as hell married to you. I'd have done the right thing by our baby, of course. But to think you would deceive me like this, you should be ashamed of yourself. And you too, Mum. I'm very sorry, Gulliver, said Sonia. I just thought that... Sandra wasn't good enough for me, is that what you thought, Mum? For your information, I don't care what you think about Sandra. She's the love of my life, and I need you to respect that. Sandra, go and pack our things, will you? We're leaving. But leaving? You can't do that, Gulliver. You've only just got here. Let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, Mum. You conspired to lie to me about Lydia's baby, passing it off as my own. How could you do that to me? I'd be raising somebody else's child. I did it because sometimes you can't see what is best for you, Gulliver. Sometimes you need a push in the right direction, that's all. Mum, I don't need you making my decisions for me concerning my life. I'm perfectly capable of making them myself. I felt extreme relief wash over me as I rushed up the stairs, threw a few things in the suitcase, and me and my husband left our indoors to make the journey back home. And I'm glad to say he allowed me to have the air conditioning on all the way. In the months that followed, Sonia did a lot of grovelling and apologising to us. So we did go down to the coast for 3 weeks. And every evening I would take long walks along the beach, hoping to see the Bigfoot again. But sadly I never did. But I'm absolutely certain she's still out there. I'm glad to say these days Sonia Finnegan treats me with a lot more respect. Only for Gully's sake, of course. Because Gully has warned her that if she so much as upsets one hair on my head, she'll never see us for dust again. And with a baby on the way, with my being 8 months pregnant, with only a month to go, Sonia wants to thoroughly enjoy the perks of being a grandmother. So the last thing she wants to do is to cause me any upset. So good did finally come out of the bad. And I think that all the chaotic upheaval in the Finnegan household, when Lydia arrived on the scene, was worth it, because I got to meet an extraordinary creature on the beach, as a consequence, who helped me up to my feet again after I fainted. And when I look back on that extraordinary event, I sometimes ask myself, did that really happen? But I assure you it did. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.